Good evening. Welcome to the March 6, 2024 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We would like to start with roll call.
Sure. Chair Levi?
Present.
Vice Chair Barton?
Present.
Commissioner Wheatley?
Present.
Commissioner Greiner?
Present.
Commissioner Seichel?
Present.
And Commissioner Bean.
Present.
We have a quorum.
All right. So the first portion of tonight is the administrative portion, and the first order of business is to look at the meeting minutes from February 7th.
I did also add the 21st on there too and have those posted.
Yes, I'm doing them one at a time.
Oh, good, okay. I wasn't sure there was enough time for folks to look at them, so if you don't want to, if folks haven't had a chance, we can always do that next meeting too.
Okay, well, let's let people chime in. Has all the commissioners taken a look at everything? Are there any comments? You got one?
Sorry,
Yeah.
the minutes.
Yes.
I worked the election yesterday, so I apologize. It was a very long day, and I have not read them. So they may have come up before that, but it's been a week.
Do you want to take a look at them right now? They're on your screen. Let's get through this.
Cool.
All right. Commissioner Wheatley, what you got?
I just wanted to say thank you to staff. You guys did an awesome job. I really feel like the minutes are a great improvement over what we had previously. So
Cool, you're welcome.
let us know if it's too much, but I really think it was a huge benefit.
Good, I'm glad we found kind of the right level of detail that's helpful, and I don't think it was an enormous amount of time to do, so. Yeah.
Really appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay. So I too also had a very busy day. I didn't actually pee until 5 o'clock, but I still managed to read all of the meeting minutes, Commissioner Bean. So
You're a better human than me. What can I tell you?
I know, superior to all. Are you done?
No, she's learning.
Wow.
You're roaming on.
Someone that doesn't have a chance to read them, they don't have to vote on it because they haven't had the opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah, because I can't read that fast. I apologize. You might be a faster reader and a better peer.
Okay. What about February 21st? It was a training, very brief. Any comments on that?
I did get to review the video, yay.
Hell yeah. Commissioner Greiner for the win. Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion on the February 21st, 2024 meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Okay. So just for the record, February 7th, we did not vote on, so that'll be moved to the next meeting agenda in April.
You can vote on it if you want to. You don't have to have a unanimous. If there's a commission member that wasn't able, they just can't vote on saying they approve them. But if there's other reasons to not move forward with approving them, then.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So February 7th meeting minutes, I would like to make a motion that those be approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And then Commissioner Bean is abstaining?
Correct.
Gotcha.
That one I didn't make it through.
No worries.
All right, second item of business is the update from the committee liaisons and work groups. And so we'll start with Commissioner Wheatley, who is on the Multimodal Transportation Commission. Any updates?
Yeah, just a couple. Multimodal Transportation Committee has moved to having 2 working session meetings a year, which I feel is a really cool platform. They basically will be having it in a public space. You could imagine any community center in town, and we'll use that as an opportunity to collaborate more among the board in a less formal way. We also reviewed Tin Kitchen Place and the way the developer had approached our board after the continuation, and they were really happy with the work we're doing trying to integrate the transportation plan with the planning process. We also briefly discussed the Brevard Road project tonight, so they provided some insight there, which I feel was beneficial to all of us.
Thank you. All right, next up, Housing Policy Work Group. So Commissioner Bean and Commissioner Faircloth had a baby. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that,
Oh,
but I
you're
just
not together, not,
no.
he had a baby. I was uninvolved with
This
that
is
process.
this is an interesting meeting. So we did not meet
Lord.
this month.
But the missing middle housing work group that's working with staff did it. Do you want an update on that? I think I'm a liaison to that.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know if that's where this fits. So that, whew, did not get pregnant and have a baby, just reiterating, that didn't happen recently. The missing middle housing working group that is made up of external stakeholders and city staff has been meeting weekly for a couple of months now, and have had really good conversations navigating some of the trade-offs that are involved with missing middle housing ordinance changes. So it's been super productive. The city staff will be presenting to the Planning and Economic Development Committee next Monday, March 11th, with a suite of proposed sort of short-term regulation or ordinance changes that will then move forward. I think perhaps we'll come here next and then get to council after that sometime this summer. And that presentation will include a number of things, some of which could include possibly reducing or eliminating parking requirements, re-legalizing duplexes in all zoning districts, and removing or calibrating minimum lot size standards. And those are just a couple examples of a whole bunch of things that will come forward, but they're not like specific, like text amendment kind of stuff that we've been looking at here. It's more like these are things that we could do with the missing middle housing recommendations. Wanting Planning and Economic Development Committee to review and give feedback and, kick around sort of what the next steps would be for that stuff. There will be more intensive community engagement later this year, regardless of what happens in this particular presentation to PED and whatever their sort of next steps call for. And that community engagement and further changes would hopefully align with the affordable housing plan process that is coming down the pike and build towards a more comprehensive revision of the UDO. So that they're doing some small things that they're floating to council now, but waiting for sort of bigger changes to be incorporated alongside those other efforts. I think that's my summary.
Awesome, thank you. So the next item, I don't think there's any other work groups. Okay. So earlier in the pre-meeting, we discussed the conversion of the Housing Policy Work Group to a subcommittee. And so there's been communication with staff, council, in particular our liaison, about how to check policy against some of the council goals, one of which was dedicated to affordable housing in the council retreat that was at the end of February. And so we just started as a commission realizing that, there were some things that, possibly could be changed in the zoning ordinance. And since it was already a council goal, we started looking at various precedent studies of other jurisdictions, some of the policies that they've implemented. And also, in North Carolina, it's kind of different from other states. You can't have more than 3 people outside of commission talking at any time. And so once the work group decided to start proposing amendments to the planning staff, and then it became complicated. Possibly creation of a subcommittee, which is well within our right. And so tonight, I would like to discuss whether that makes sense or if we, as a board, roll that into our regular meetings. And so this will be a discussion. I want to limit it so that we can move on the rest of the agenda. But does anyone have any preference for the discussion of policy regarding housing to be discussed during the commission time or a subcommittee being formed?
I'd just like to thank the chair and the housing work group and staff for helping us, escalate an approach to this issue. Chair Levi alluded to the council retreat where they sort of revised their strategic priority, and I'll just read what council's strategic priority under equitable and affordable housing and stability is, and I think where the discussion around UDO amendments came from. So council's new fiscal year 24 strategic priority on equitable and affordable housing and stability is to maximize tools, plans, and regulations to increase housing supply, prioritize access for low-income residents and households, reduce barriers to construction, and begin preparing to update the Unified Development Ordinance and initiate a 2024 housing bond. So a lot of that speaks to the goals of this body. And I think having not seen the level of housing production that we need to as a community to sustain our workforce, and particularly our low-income members of this community, I do think that we need an avenue to communicate clear, surgical, and bold UDO amendments to City Council, and engage in a public conversation around what this might look like. It's not a time to protect what we have and to be shy about shedding some of the UDO policies that have created the housing crisis. So this is a mission statement that we created when we thought we were heading towards a housing subcommittee. I'll read this. The font is very small, but I'll pull it up on my screen for those listening. The proposed mission statement for the Housing Subcommittee would be to respond with greater urgency to Asheville's housing crisis. The Housing Subcommittee of the Asheville Planning and Zoning Commission has been established to study, review, and make amendment proposals to the Unified Development Ordinance, UDO, and the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan. We seek to address the continued inequities associated with a lack of access to stable, diverse housing in Asheville, as well as persistent systemic barriers in Asheville's current exclusionary land use policies. So this was, the charge. We think that we have a unique role in making suggestions. They don't have to be adopted. We're not a unilateral authority, but we can certainly make suggestions to council for consideration. So I'd love to hear full commission's thoughts on how we do this, whether we do it within council commission meetings or as a separate subcommittee.
Oof, I mean, it seems to me like it is a challenge to both cooperate with all the efforts that staff has going on while also encouraging them to move faster through a lot of levels of bureaucratic process that I respect are cumbersome. And I ultimately want our efforts, their efforts, council's efforts, community advocates' efforts to be successful, right? Like I don't know what the best process is to respond with the greatest urgency, but I want it to be a successful response and not one that ends up getting mired in confusion and conflict. So just given what we're hearing earlier this evening about how it's a challenge for staff to support a different committee meeting, I guess my current inclination is to not create it yet and try and keep talking about what a good process might be so that we are ultimately set up for success. But I totally respect and hear, Jeffrey, what you're saying around we have got to be able, we have to create a path to propose, surgical changes to our outdated UDO that would help us address this crisis faster. So I don't know, a lot of that's swirling, but I'm tempted to sort of like keep working on creating that process rather than creating one too fast that is going to be problematic ultimately.
I think I'd like to see us pursue it within the meeting for now, and then kind of do a litmus test on whether they're ready to take on more. It sounds like they're overwhelmed at this point.
You going?
Yeah, so just to kind of give everyone a brief bozo update on where these UDO text amendments are and the sense of urgency I think that council has tried to portray in their ambition for this year is that, this housing crisis that we're living in has been ongoing for years. It's not like it just popped up on our doorstep today. I think, rents last year on apartments went up greater than 20%. Also, at the same time, 80% of the housing being built in the metropolitan statistical area of Asheville, which is the 5-county region surrounding Asheville, are responsible for the housing. So 80% of all the housing being built is actually being built outside of Asheville. Only 20% of the housing for that 5-county area is happening in our city. That appears to be either a bug in the system, something unintentional happening outside of our planning and zoning and urban design ambition, or it's intentional. So it's either intentionally exclusionary or unintentionally exclusionary. And council has stated this year the ambition is housing supply. In the last 2 years, if we look at the form of both staff and this commission, because we have the obligation to put forward amendments that align with the 2018 comprehensive plan, both staff, ourselves, and council have all shown the inability to get UDO amendments complete to help increase significantly the housing supply within the city limits of Asheville. That doesn't just impact housing itself, housing affordability, access to housing, but it also impacts our tax basis through property tax. Some people may or may not be aware that there's many budget shortfalls within our city, and property tax is the primary way that we actually grow that revenue base. So when we talk about this subcommittee and it functioning as a precise small group of folks who are well studied in the UDO to put forward UDO amendments to planning and zoning, to PED, to city council, I think that speaks to the overall ambition of this board in general and what our obligation is to the public. And so I would say this subcommittee has taken months to form already, for those who aren't aware. This has been kicked around as it is. We may or may not have months to continue to contribute to that effort. I'm not sure. That's up to this board. But it's not a fast-moving process to even get to this vote. And also, the subcommittee doesn't move forward in perpetuity forever. We could just as equally next month vote to remove the subcommittee if we feel it's not effective. And so what is right now an opportunity to create something, this may come back or it may not come back. And also the ability to take the subcommittee out of our purview or to remove it is also an opportunity in the future. So it's not really binary. It's not have it or don't have it. It can also be have it and try it out for a little while and see if it's useful and see if it's effective and if we like the work it's going to produce.
Thank you. I am in favor of a subcommittee, And here's why. I normally don't make any personal statements up here, but I have to say, just getting the subcommittee formed, I can understand why people are frustrated by getting development built in Asheville. Because first, the working group, can do this, and then the subcommittee, oh, we'll give you staff, but then we won't. So it's been really hard. We really want to work with staff and council on this, and it's been really frustrating. And I have to say, we have a chance to do something different, to try it. A lot of people come in here and they speak against development, and they say, well, I'm afraid this person's gonna come in my backyard and use my grill or something, I don't know, as an example. And that's the reason they don't support the development. It's kind of like the same thing. Well, we're not sure if we have staff to support these amendments that we're proposing potentially in the subcommittee. And so I just think there's a lot of fear. We have something that we really need to look at, and we're not trying to get in anyone's way. I just don't want fear of not getting it right or being successful to get in the way of doing something that could make a change. So I'm in favor of the subcommittee. Let's try it. And I think we have really, really great people that can take it forward and be respectful and work within the legal parameters that we have.
Can I ask, what is the advantage of, obviously I'm new to the background on this, what is the advantage of forming this subcommittee versus discussing this in our normal meetings?
I'll offer my perspective on that. I think, we're having a lengthy conversation right now about just forming the subcommittee, and if we want to hash out the nuances and ins and outs of specific amendments, I feel like either the subcommittee or, it was aspirational that it would happen in a working group to kind of put at least a couple minds together before we take up time at commission meetings. So the idea would be some group comes up with massages, puts in, format that's ready for Planning and Zoning Commission to review a text amendment that would come to the full commission to receive a recommendation to send forward to council or send back to the subcommittee for more work or just abandon altogether. So I think the goal was actually to be more efficient with our time, but I certainly understand.
It's also recorded, the public can watch it as a subcommittee, so it's not like anything's being done in secret. And other commissions have subcommittees. It's not a new concept. So I would like to make a motion that we form the Housing Policy Subcommittee for Planning and Zoning Commission. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay, is that how you oppose? Nay.
I'm just not sure I can support at this time without the background information.
Okay. So that is a 4. Commissioner Griner, how did you vote?
I'm not supportive of it.
Okay, so
at
you're
this
nay.
time.
So we have 3, 4, 2 against, and 1 abstaining. So we did not pass the motion. Would we like to propose an alternate motion?
Well, I think maybe what we're hearing is carry forward these conversations within the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Yes.
And so we can perhaps take it, the next step would be working with staff to have in the administrative section or somewhere on our agenda sort of a recurring discussion around housing policy and what we can do collaboratively. And that might be how we advance
Yep.
specific policies is just as a full commission, which I'm happy to do, you know, we'll see how efficient we can run that.
And so is that something we need to vote on?
No, I don't think so. I think that dovetails with your natural work, and there's no official change that you're
Okay.
proposing necessarily, so.
Awesome.
I mean, I totally get the whole reason to have a committee, absolutely. I think if they're productive, I'm just thinking timing might be a little better
Okay,
if we wait.
fair enough. All right. Well, hopefully we can pass this next item on our agenda. Appointment of the Planning and Zoning Commission liaison to the Soil Erosion and Stormwater Review Committee. We have a new commissioner joining us. I make a motion that Jason Cycle be appointed as the Planning and Zoning Liaison to the Soil Erosion and Stormwater Review Committee. Do I have a second?
Second, could you spell his last name too? Sorry.
May I get some clarification on why he's qualified to do that?
Sure.
Would you like me to speak to that?
Yeah.
So as a registered landscape architect, I deal with stormwater and erosion control on a daily basis, and in fact, that's my specialty. I'm a certified erosion control inspector, and I do stormwater inspections on a weekly basis, and design stormwater plans, erosion control plans.
And this particular position has been on an as-needed basis. In my time on the commission, I've not seen anybody be appointed as a liaison, but it is as needed. It's kind of like the Board of Adjustment for stormwater.
As needed.
Yeah. So remind me, did we have a second?
We did.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No, motion passes unanimously. Congratulations.
Welcome.
All right, next item is the review of the Planning and Zoning Retreat Agenda Draft. Mr. Palmquist will put it up on the screen here.
Scroll through as necessary, but I'll let
Yeah.
you take the lead there.
So we've
Kim.
been working on this for a little while, and it's in the folder. We figured the first part of the day would be more training/presentation, hopefully quiz style. Put people on the spot, make it more fun, but we're realizing we need to kind of go over some of the basics, set some expectations for the group, maybe some things that we can agree to, setting the stage, and then moving on into the staff-led presentation, with the afternoon being more interactive, utilizing a facilitator, and having some exercises, which may be brainstorming, charrette, visiting a job site, doing something as a group, and then kind of identifying, all of our methods of community engagement through our personal and professional lives. And it will be held at Southside Center on March 15th, next Friday. Does anyone have any comments? I know that emails have gone around and people have weighed in so far, but if anyone thinks of anything or would like to reorder anything, let me know.
Appreciate the work on it, for sure.
Yeah. There will be food, I hope. Well, no news is good news. Do we need to make a motion or just,
No, we'll share a finalized draft
Okay.
if things change in the meantime. But yeah, really excited. It should be really good. Should be a good combination of information sharing and then brainstorming and thinking outside the box a little bit more. And so, yeah, I'm excited.
okay. Awesome, thank you. All right, so we do have a couple of continuances, and I wanted to get those out of the way first. So the first one, the applicant has requested a continuance on the quasi-judicial public hearing, a request for a special use permit for a group home located at 130 Rock Hill Road. The property is identified as PIN number 9656-28-7379 in the Buncombe County tax record. Property owner is Lee Shi. I hope I got that right. I apologize. The applicant contact is Mr. Carl Singletary. Planner coordinating review, Will Palmquist. We make a motion to continue this item until the April 3rd, 2024 meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. So the next one that we would like to continue is under the legislative public hearings. It's a zoning map amendment or request to rezone property located at 9999 Long Shoals Road from residential single-family low-density RS2 to highway business HB. Property is identified as PIN number 9645-90-0001 in the Buncombe County tax record. The property owner is Windade LLC. The applicant contact is Mr. Derek Allen, Planner Coordinating Review, Will Palmquist. I'd like to make a motion that this item be continued to the April 3rd, 2024 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item, update on it's a presentation on the Urban Centers Initiative presented by Mr. Collins.
Okay, good evening, Chris Collins. I'm the Assistant Director of the Planning and Urban Design Department. When we spoke before, Commissioner Barton at a pre-meeting, we talked about this update, and it's a very small update. In the areas that were identified by the Urban Centers Initiative, rezoned to the urban place zoning and subject to the newer foreign district that is there, we've had a handful of sign permits and changes in occupancy, but we have not seen any development activity above a level 1 site plan. So that's, no fancy slides or anything because there's nothing to show you. We have not seen development activity in those areas as of yet.
What about the Sears project?
We have seen several site plans, some even close to approval for that site, but since there was way back, y'all all knew it probably as the Seritage development, if you'd heard of that one. That made it all the way to council. I believe even got approval, but the approval expired and the applicant abandoned the project. We have not had an official application on that site since that time. We've had a couple of kind of conceptual sessions with folks and things like that, but we have not seen anything since the Urban Centers Initiative and the Urban Place rezoning.
And the reason that applicant backed out, was that because of finance or regulatory?
I couldn't say. We weren't given a reason.
Okay.
It was the big thing, pre-COVID development application.
Okay.
I don't know if it changed the nature of what they wanted to do on the site, but we weren't given detailed information on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I just don't know all the history of it. When did that study start? Was that part of the fallout of the 2018 comp plan?
I don't know if I call it the fallout,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
part of the implementation of the 2018 comp plan.
Cool.
Yeah, and it started after that. The rezoning itself, I can look up the date and get for you when those rezonings happened. Those properties or those areas that were identified as urban centers in the comprehensive plan, future land use map, were rezoned to urban place.
Ah.
And that was basically a form-based zoning, so it's looking more at building form and a mix of uses rather than prescribing the exact uses that go in those properties.
So urban place was the only zoning type that came out of that?
Correct.
Okay, so that was 2021, I think, right?
Right, I believe you are correct. I didn't want to give you a wrong date, but that sounds right, yeah.
Cool. So given that housing supply in those locations, and that was the targeted objective, what kind of, because I think that was a 2-year study. I think that was a big study. I think that was.
Moving into it, yeah.
Yeah,
before
the
I-
Urban Centers Initiative. I think that was 2 years of staff time.
Approximately, yes.
So what kind of timeline would we expect to like start seeing some of those, ambitions to bear fruit?
Well, one would have hoped we would have seen something already. I know that there has been a slower start to some commercial activity, especially retail, in the wake of the COVID pandemic and what came out of that. We haven't seen anywhere a lot of new kind of large retail developments and things like that. And that's traditionally what went into these corridor areas that were, retail centers along Tunnel Road and Merriman Avenue. We haven't seen that type of that development. What the Urban Centers Initiative did in the urban place rezoning was to bring in a requirement to bring in a mix of uses to that type of development. So not having seen a great baseline of overall kind of commercial retail development, it's not super surprising to me that we haven't seen both of those come together. We have seen a good bit of just multifamily development come along. And of course, you've reviewed your fair share of hotels in the city of late. But we haven't seen that kind of corridor retail concept really coming back strong yet. Or at least that's what we've seen through our intake of development applications. There was some resistance when we met people previously to kind of meet the requirements of that urban place zoning for connected transportation networks, maybe developers who aren't used to building residential. It's outside of their wheelhouse. It's really conjecture I'm giving you and just anecdotal stuff from those pre-meetings at this point, but yeah.
That's really cool. So was that primarily targeted at commercial, or was the intent for housing? I guess I just don't, because it's like 50 pages, so I tried to get through all of it.
Yeah, it's a long, yeah.
It seemed really complex.
It was targeted at a mix of uses, right? It was targeted at bringing housing into those commercial developments as well. So you could say in that way, it's targeted at adding housing. One of the key features I would note is it did raise that threshold, about our whole level 3 threshold based on your residential unit count. Right now it's at 50. In that urban place zoning, it's up to 80. So there was kind of an allowance, and let's say, go ahead, you can build more units and not rezone. But we haven't seen that happen, so.
I wonder if you see that as a rejection to the change as a result of not having applications.
I think, I don't know. I don't want to say for sure how we see that, but yeah, I mean, some sites may be owned by folks who aren't in the mixed-use development game. I'll just say that. True.
And have other cities created an initiative similar to urban centers in Asheville?
I don't have an answer ready for you on that.
Okay.
But we can find out.
Yeah.
So.
Any other questions?
At a certain point, when we have kind of these broad, I think the UDO is like, Chapter 7 is like 247 pages. So if there's a zoning that's 50 pages, that would signal to me that that's the most important zoning in Asheville, maybe. And it doesn't feel necessarily like, at least the market agrees. Is there a point at which, as a city, we look at repealing a zoning type like that may be an encumbrance to development in those areas?
We haven't discussed it yet, but I'm sure there is a point, And I do know we're working on, it came up in the council retreat, everyone knows it's a goal. We're trying to update the development ordinance as a whole, and that would be a time where we would look at these things for sure, such as the urban place zoning.
Is that something that would be welcomed, like to put on an agenda item here for our open discussion. I think it, those areas, those transportation corridors are really targeted for housing and transit supportive development. And so if we're not seeing that, if we're seeing, especially in these areas that are high value, that's a barrier to housing, if it's seen as, something that it is overly complex or overly specific for a use type, a land use, is that something, a good one for us to go ahead and start talking about in this open format?
If you're asking me, I'll defer to the chair,
Yeah.
who works to set the agenda with staff, and, yeah.
I'd be interested
We
to
could-
see what other municipalities are doing
Yeah,
with it.
we
if
could
it
totally
exists.
talk about that and add it to the agenda. I think it's a good discussion. I would just ask the commissioners to be able to, come up with a case study if they can. Ask your contacts, see if you've heard of anything.
Yeah, I remember I'd heard about it in other cities, but it was usually coupled with infrastructure investment by the city. So in other words, light rail systems, billion-dollar rollouts. And I mean, I don't mean to besmirch the good name of Asheville, but we don't really have billion-dollar transit plans here. So that's
Yeah,
the
like-
case study I've seen the most, used with urban centers.
And how, is it similar to transit-oriented development at all? Because I know Charlotte has that.
I mean, yes, I guess.
Okay.
These are
to
zoning
look at
districts
it,
that are
yeah.
aimed at promoting good urban development, good
Yeah.
forum, pedestrian-friendly development, interconnected transportation networks. Of course, a transit-oriented development is centered around effective transit. That was a consideration in the 2018 comp plan when looking at what is designated as an urban center was transit availability, transit supportive corridors.
Totally.
So you can make a connection, but they are definitely different animals also.
I'd like to pick up a thread that Commissioner Wheatley laid down to even expand for future consideration on our agenda, just looking at the effectiveness of our form-based code districts overall. I think we've spent a lot of community engagement time and effort over the last 10 years implementing some form-based districts, and I'm wondering what the effect has been. I don't have an answer. I just think
Positive or
that,
negative, yeah.
yeah, it'd be interesting to look and see, obviously, we all love mixed-use development, we all have these values, but it'd be interesting to look at it through a lens of, have we created barriers to development on these high-priority transit-supported corridors? So it may be something that we look beyond urban centers and kind of look more broadly at.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's like I don't see apartment complexes popping up on Haywood Road, and that's essentially an entire mixed-use neighborhood that you would think maybe dense development would want to be in and adjacent to some of these, like James Beard award-winning restaurants. They don't got to build them themselves. A multifamily developer could do that for the community, maybe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Let's see, next up, ministerial public hearing, a request for the Level 2 site plan review of a new 6-story mixed-use hotel building located at 215 Haywood Street. The property is identified as PIN number 9649-10-5680 in the Buncombe County tax record. Property is owned by PHG Asheville LLC. Applicant contact is Mr. Tony Hauser. Planner coordinating review, Clay Mitchell.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. This is a little bit different than the last hotel application we looked at, and so I thought I would take a step back because we have several new commissioners that have not done a level 2 hotel review and give you some regulatory context for what's happening tonight. This is the applicable sections of the UDO that govern the process that we're engaged in. This hotel is located in the central business district and the design review overlay. Accordingly, it's treated a little differently than any other district in the city because of its location. So this level 2 has additional steps in it, and tonight is one of those additional steps. And that is number 6, and the point of number 6 is the commission shall review the conceptual site plan for compliance with applicable standards. So this application has already had several prior reviews from the Technical Review Committee. It's met with the Downtown Commission. It's had 3 meetings with the Design Review Commission. And now it's here to you to make this determination that the conceptual site plan is in compliance with applicable standards. After this, it would then go back to the Technical Review Committee for a final review. Both of those steps are normally not available or required of a level 2 application. So it's equally complex, but for different reasons. There are different regulatory layers that apply to this type of application. I think there's also probably, I should probably mention this, we treat hotels in a lot of different ways. We have small hotels, which are 7 to 35 rooms. We have large hotels, which are 36 rooms and above. We have hotels that trigger level 3 review at 116 rooms and above. And then we have level 1 and 2 below 115 rooms, provided there's a certain amount of square footage of other things. So it's fairly complicated. It's okay to recognize that, and I just want to point that out. So a lot of terms get thrown around, and it's because of the way we treat that in our UDO. Now, as to the specific site, some of you that have been here for a while, you're familiar with this area. We have looked at 2 other hotels on property between Ann and Carter Street. This is at the top of Ann Street, so to speak, immediately adjacent to the DoubleTree parking garage. It's like a 2-level parking deck right there. It's currently occupied by a single-story abandoned, I guess it was kind of a commercial use. There's a couple of driveways onto the site. I think people are using it for staging or parking, formerly for the now recently constructed Embassy Suites. It is within the hotel overlay, it's within this central business district, and it's also within the design review overlay. The future land use designation is downtown. It is outside the area that we call the traditional downtown core, and it is located within the tallest height zone, which I believe is set at 240 feet. Is that the? 255, 240? Much taller than this building is. So that's the location at the top of that street. The basics of this site are the building, it's 115 rooms, again, because at 116, it would be a level 3. So it's 115 rooms, which is the maximum you can have for a level 2 review. It's a 6-story building with a subgrade parking area. The parking lot, the parking facility on the right, you can see that some of the parking spaces are tandem, meaning cars are going to be stacked. And then those shaded areas are actually lifts. So this entire parking area will be managed by valet. Public will not be able to access it at all. If you want to bring your car to this hotel, it will be valeted, and it will be managed by the hotel itself. Total gross area is under 100,000 at 80,000. It includes the administrative services, the rooms, and the amenities for the hotel, and a separate bistro area at the front of the building adjacent to the sidewalk. The main entrance is joined, but treated separately. There's a pedestrian entrance and the vehicle entrance to the west side of the site. That curvy line is pedestrian. There's a curb there, so cars will be able to pull in, people drop off, the valet will take the cars and put them below the building. There's parking for bicycles at that front area in that kind of vestibule, outdoor vestibule area. And then on the east side of the site, which I'll show you in later plans, is a separate entrance into the bistro at the front of the building. So these are the floor plans. It's a little busy. The left, as you're looking at it, the left screen with the red box, that is the ground level floor. The red box denotes the area that is separate space, so that's the bistro with its entrance defined there. You see in the lower right-hand corner of that middle, that image right there. And then the hotel entrance is, like I said, is now a little bit bigger and easier to see in that curved kind of pedestrian area, and the lobby is there in the back. So the hotel overlay requires that 50% of the facade facing the building be that separate occupiable storefront, and the plans meet that requirement with this bistro at the front of the building. It has its own public access from the roadway, which is actually pedestrian access from the sidewalks, the new sidewalks on Haywood. The middle plan is the second floor. It's the only floor different than the rest. There is a couple of amenities on that, a courtyard, some conference space and some offices. And then to the right is the representation of the next 4 floors of rooms for guest rooms. Site plan, landscaping components, because it's in the central business district, a significant amount of our landscape requirements do not apply. There's no building impacts, there's no buffers, there's no open space requirements. Street trees are required and provided on the plans. They are large maturing trees. The applicants will be burying the utility lines immediately in front of the building now. That is both a fire requirement, it also is an aesthetic improvement, and it allows for the installation of those larger trees. In lieu of providing tree canopy, the developers will be paying a fee. That fee has been calculated at $67,375.92. With respect to operations, again, this is a hotel. We have separate operational requirements. 100% valet parking, no public access to that subsurface parking area. There is no traffic study required for this because it's below 100 peak hour trips. I will be adding that to my staff reports going forward and explaining how that gets arrived at. I know it was kind of obtuse how that comes about, but it has to do with calculations based on in the International Traffic Engineers study. A couple of the operations of the facility will be taking place off-site, and that includes deliveries and waste management. The landowners or the owners are negotiating an agreement with the abutting property owners, the DoubleTree, to provide space for deliveries and for waste management. And also, because this is a level 2 and part of our new operational ordinance that allows hotels to go through this process, which is truncated and a more direct process than the level 3 process, they will be providing compliance with the public benefits component of that ordinance. And the applicant has proposed at this stage to be choosing from group 2 for affordable housing and reparations to achieve 210 points, and then group 3 for neighborhood improvements for an additional 20 points to get them above the required points that they need. The estimated total contribution as of now is going to be $724,500. The design, which is really what takes a lot of time for these applications. 3 primary components that I want to highlight tonight are fenestration, the materials, and then the overall process that the design review committee undertook. So in the upper left-hand corner there, the purple and the blue, you see how we calculate the fenestration requirements. Plans are compliant, much higher requirements on that ground floor than the upper facades. All the facades are shown in the plan set. This is just a representative. The materials sheets look like this on the upper right, where you have bricks, some cladding materials, the type of glass and the type of windows. All of that is color-coded and described in the plans and has been reviewed by the design review committee. And then we see one image here in the bottom. This is the final design that was approved by the design review committee, and I'll go through some of the specific details related to that. A lot of time was spent with the design review committee and the architects and the applicant team to come up with a way to treat that streetscape. And some of the elements that you see here are the separate entrances, some engagement at the base of the building with planters, the location and the type of street trees and grading, and then that separate entrance where the bistro is. It was originally started out right up front working with the design review committee in the language of the design review committee, celebrating that entrance by bringing it back, making it more defined, putting planters in there to make people feel, one, that it is a separate entrance and that it's very inviting and to bring people into that building and that use as a separate use distinct from the hotel itself. Actual treatments on the sidewalk are play into this as well. And the applicant is working with Public Works and the engineering department to engage with some special treatment along the sidewalk. The sidewalk will be running bond, our typical pattern. In those more granular kind of hashed areas, there's going to be additional treatment to kind of set apart those entrances so that pedestrians will see that and notice it. And again, it'll be kind of a relational draw between the entrances and the sidewalk so that it doesn't just look like a sidewalk going all the way down through that area. These are basically the four directional kind of views. This is where the design review committee spent a lot of time talking about the feel of this building as it integrated into our downtown. You see some of the elements of our requirements. One is we have a step back requirement at the front. So you see there are 2 stories, and then there's a step back, and then the building goes up. That's a mandatory requirement under design elements, and the architects and the design review committee spent a lot of time talking about the materials, the scope, the scale, the colors, how that all would work, because the building is, the lot is not quite square, and we have a 0-foot setback, and then we have a step back. And so there was a lot of time spent on coming up with this element, and you can see that paid off there in the upper right-hand corner. And the design review committee and the architects were also it was important to look at the view shed from 240, because this building is going to be highly visible as you come into Asheville up 240. And so you see kind of that street level view as you're coming up, you know where the cell tower is. But a lot of attention was added to the quote-unquote back of the building to kind of tie those architectural elements from the front to the back, and then also provide some interesting differential between the colors and the materials on the mid portion of the building. This slide I'd like to add, I did this once before. On the left side of the screen, you see the original application as it was submitted to the design review committee, and then at least 2 iterations later, you see what ultimately was arrived at between these, with this kind of collaborative process, I have to say, between the applicant team and the design review committee to end up with the building on the right. So you can see some of the elements that changed. There was this tower in the kind of front corner that the group worked out, reintegrating that back into the building. You can see the obvious changes in the nature of the step back area, how it's more prominent, there's more brick in that location. So I just wanted to highlight that so that you could see what that looks like. Here's the process, originally approved by technical review committee in October, went to the downtown commission with overall supportive response with some comments that were provided and integrated. And then in the middle of all of that, there was design review committee, 3 meetings, 2 of them were informal, and then a final formal review in December. And it was approved with several conditions that I had addressed in my memo with a vote of 7-1. And as I said before, following tonight, your review of the conceptual plan, it would then go back to the final TRC for a review of a detailed development plan so that could be then forwarded on for permitting. With that charge that you have to review the conceptual site plan for compliance with the standards, we, the staff, finds that these applicable standards have been met, and we recommend that you review it, and it would be our recommendation that it is in compliance with those technical standards. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have
Any
one.
questions for staff?
And I believe some members of the applicant team are here, so if I can't answer the question, I will, with the chair's permission, ask them.
I was just wondering, and I'm sorry if I missed it, but is this considered a large hotel?
Large?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like broken down into large
Ye-
and small.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, no,
I'm
and the reason I brought that up,
finding-
it is so confusing, because there's so many different definitions. So by definition, a small hotel is 7 to 35, and then 36 and above is large.
Okay, cool. Because I was just wondering, and I might have missed it in the material, but under operational standards, it has us, all large hotels shall provide shuttle service to guests, and I didn't know if they provided any transparency into that during the review process.
I believe it was mentioned, if anybody from the design team is here to address that. Thank you. A lot of head shaking.
Yeah.
Thank you for not shaking your head.
Yeah, sure.
Please state your name.
Sure. My name's Chris Sandcooler. I'm an architect with Studio Z Architecture. We're a firm based out of Charlotte. Related to Commissioner Wheatley's question, our ownership team is considering that. I don't know if, we're still pretty early in the design process. I don't know if concrete measures have been made, but the intent for the ownership team is to comply with all applicable standards. I can hang out up here if you guys have any more questions.
Would you like to add anything?
No, I think that was very thorough. No, nothing to add.
Okay. Any further questions or comments?
I'll just thank you staff for a great presentation and particularly providing the public benefits that will be bestowed as a result of this. And in the absence of Commissioner Faircloth, having an amount on the pay in lieu for the tree canopy protection.
Yeah,
Much
I really do
appreciated.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Brendan is sitting at home with his baby, fist raised in the air, saying thank you for providing that information. It's just helpful to have, kind of a complete record of what the proposal entails.
I have some less project-specific questions, but definitely questions that are, I think, maybe interesting to the commission and maybe staff as well. But just, we're all kind of new to the hotel overlay and the public benefits table and all of that. So, and there's a lot of dialogue in our community and discourse about whether hotels are needed or not. And so one crazy question I had is, does your team, I've seen you before, I don't know if this is the only development you've worked on here in Asheville, but has your team produced any kind of feasibility study that looked at whether more than 115 hotel rooms might be needed here in Asheville, or what kind of demand there is for hotels?
Sure. So for better or for worse, I'm just an architect. I don't unfortunately deal with the feasibility studies for what makes these projects work financially. We just try and provide a product to our clients that meets their financial requirements. I'm happy to pass along contact information or relay questions, but I unfortunately can't provide a specific answer to that.
That's really cool. I mean, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, the contact information would be great because, as you can hear, we get tasked with research sometimes, and it's super helpful to have that from the private market. You may, from the architectural side or not, have been engaged in a conversation around if there was an opportunity on this site to get level 2 approval with more than 115 rooms. I mean, to me, the community benefit or the public benefit of $724,000 is a lot of money. I don't have it rolling around, but maybe somebody who could get approved for more rooms than that would have pursued that on this site.
Yeah, I can't speak for the ownership team. They would ultimately make that decision. In my professional experience, not just on this project, but across the board, generally, the more guest rooms an ownership team can get, the more financially feasible the project is. So, but like I said, I'm speaking on just personal experience and not on behalf of the ownership team.
Super duper appreciate you taking that.
Yeah, sure.
That risk, we'll call it.
Sure. Any other questions?
I'd just like to comment that the 10 years I spent on Downtown Commission and watching the design review committee work with the architects and the developers, we end up with a much better project. And it's great to see them work in tandem, and I know how hard that is. And you said 3 different meetings with the design review committee, so I appreciate Mr. Mitchell showing the difference between what it was and what it is, so.
I
Yeah,
got,
I agree with that. I think it's definitely much improved, and I appreciate that as well.
one more just nerd question. Did you and your team find the level 2 process, with the overlay? Did you feel that was clear and helped enable the project and give it guidance and direction?
Generally, I would say the process was very clear. The staff we worked with was extremely helpful. Every committee meeting we attended, all feedback was clear. I will say, relatively speaking, we work in a lot of jurisdictions on hotels, less complex, more complex than this one. This isn't an easy one to get through. There's a lot of steps involved. But in terms of the actual process and the clearness of what's expected, I would say yes.
I just want to repeat what I heard. It was clear, not easy, but clear.
Yes, yeah.
All right, we
yes.
can accept that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. I would say, off the record, I could provide maybe some feedback on like the specific UDO. There were some sections that were tough to interpret or some things that might have been conflicting. But yeah, those are minute nerd question details that we don't have to get into.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Super.
Well-
I just got to say, that's really
Well,
cool.
now we got to talk about them in this meeting, so what you got?
I mean, I would have to prepare specific
Okay.
items, I think. Yeah.
We'll
yeah.
see you again.
Did someone turn up the heat in here?
Unfortunately, yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have it all memorized.
What, I can't have sass? Okay.
One thing that I'd like to just bring up that I think Commissioner Wheatley was hinting at is having the room count limit, but a much higher height limit. We were sort of creating smaller buildings on limited lot areas, perhaps then creating a demand for more hotel sites rather than fewer hotel sites that can accommodate more rooms. So we'll put a pin in that, but as we look from a regulatory standpoint, if this could have handled 180 rooms, 200 rooms on that limited footprint, would we actually be limiting the amount of acreage in Asheville that we are dedicating to hotels?
I appreciate that, and I appreciate Commissioner Wheatley bringing that up. And in addition, the most recent question that he had regarding to how easy or difficult it was moving through this process.
I would just say, prior to having the community benefits table, it was the wild, wild west. And then you get all the way through design review and ready to go forward, and there'd be some monkey wrench thrown into it. So I appreciate them having that table to be able to manipulate and see what works best for them.
Thanks. All right. Anybody want to make a motion?
Do we have public comment?
Oh, public comment. Yeah, let's do that.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
A lot of stuff today. So at 6:15, we'll open for public comment. Come on up. 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
My name's David. I'm generally in favor of a hotel in this location, and I just wanted to kind of go through some data to help understand the hotel market here, because there's a lot of confusion, I think. So I went through GIS, and there are 16 hotels downtown, and they take up 18.5 acres of land. If you take out the Renaissance Hotel and the Sheraton, that means all the hotels, the remaining hotels downtown, take up 8.5 acres. That means all the hotels we have downtown could fit in the Renaissance and Sheraton land space. Or put another way, all the hotels we have downtown besides those two could fit in McCormick Field. So putting in perspective, we have 32,771 acres of land. Hotels downtown take up 0.06% of the land in Asheville. The downtown hotels pay $3 million of tax, property tax annually. That's 1.4% of the budget. That means they pay 25 times the tax rate versus the average land in Asheville. For example, the Restoration Hotel pays $467,974 per acre. As a comparison, the Kmart on Patton pays $4,415 per acre. The average hotel, this is including the Renaissance, actually, taking out the Renaissance and the Sheraton, the hotels pay on average $276,719 per acre. It's actually the most money per acre of any land in Asheville. Even the district apartments on Fairview Road, which people would say is pretty dense, pays only $35,000 per acre of land. So if land is our concern and getting the most out of it, hotels are some of the most efficient ways to tax. The other thing to bear in mind is this section of Haywood Street. Almost all the buildings wouldn't be allowed to be built today because our code currently downtown requires 2 stories and no parking in the front. That means almost every building on that street would be illegal today to build. And on the other hand, also nobody that I know walks in that area. So I think it's a great location for a hotel. I think I'd much rather have hotels downtown than Airbnbs. I think we've got, 6,000 to 8,000 in the county. Those are all illegal, whether you like it or not. You can't open a nightclub in your house. You can't open a restaurant in your house. So why can you open a hotel in your house? And yet, we don't enforce that. Well, if we're not going to enforce it, the only way is to compete by building more rooms downtown. It's more environmentally friendly. People can walk to services.
Thank you, David. No last
Thank you.
name. For your comment unrelated to the UDO. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we close public comment at 6:19. Anyone like to make a motion?
I'm going to clarify too, from guidance from Janice, that we need to add to the motion that the project complies with applicable standards.
It's just missing
No.
that sentence.
Okay, so no technical modifications.
No, it's just that the motion doesn't
Be more-
reference
be
the
more clear.
basic reason you're approving it, which is that the plans show that it meets the standards, the technical standards. So somebody can just add that in there, if you are approving it.
Can we do it together, Janice?
Sure.
Okay. Miss Ashley, sorry.
That's okay.
Would someone like to make a motion with Miss Ashley's help? Come on,
All right, I'll take the bait.
okay.
I move to approve the Level 2 project located at 215 Haywood Street as presented, based on site plans, architectural plans, elevations, and materials submitted, and discussion heard during this review, and note that the
And
proposal...
find that it meets.
And find that
the
it meets the applicable
applicable
standards.
standards.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. I can't say unanimously, but you know.
We got it.
You got it. Thank you. What time is it, 6:20? All right, let's roll. Next up, we got a legislative public hearing, zoning map amendment, a request to amend the conditional zoning ordinance, ordinance number 4723 for property located at 1568 Brevard Road to make changes to the overall site plan and development proposal. The property is identified as PIN number 9636-10-3860 in the Buncombe County Tax Record. Property owner is Buncombe County. The applicant contact is Mr. David Tuck, planner coordinating review, Will Palmquist. And I believe we have a recusal.
Yes, Chair, I'd like to request a recusal from discussion on this project due to a conflict of interest.
Okay.
Can you state the general nature?
Yes, I am employed by the applicant.
And usually what we do is that the board allows
Yes.
the recusal if you vote
Yes.
for that.
I'll make a motion
Okay.
to recuse Commissioner Cycle from deliberation and vote on this matter.
I second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Don't make googly eyes. Okay. All right, take it away, Mr. Palmquist.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. I'll be presenting this conditional zoning petition. I'll note that we do have members from our design team and the applicant as well, which is Buncombe County, including the Directors of Planning and Community and Economic Development. They have a short presentation prepared as well, so we can decide how we want to handle that. But I'd like to give them the opportunity to present as well, perhaps before I get too much into Q&A, because it might cover some of those items you might have questions about as well. This project is known as Ferry Road Community. It's located in South Asheville. It's a pretty large site. It's 137 acres, all wooded for the most part. You can see the topography on that map showing the elevation change throughout the site, kind of the plateaus that you'll see corresponds to their development plan on future slides. The site has some interesting history. Used to be city-owned, has a former conditional zoning on it that, if you look at the plans, looks like a little more of a standard residential single-family subdivision that was approved a few years ago. County is the owner of the land and the applicant for this project, and they are seeking an amendment to the conditional zoning to do a different development proposal that we'll talk about shortly. Just wanted to zoom out a little bit and show a little more context. It's really an interesting site in context with this part of Asheville, the site being located here between Brevard Road, I-26, the French Broad River. You have the North Carolina Arboretum to the south, the Biltmore Estate to the north, as well as the Asheville Outlets and the Brittany, can't pronounce it now. Thank you. Facility to the south across the French Broad River as well. So it's an interesting site in a lot of ways and really pivotal in the context of this part of Asheville. So as mentioned, the existing zoning already is residential expansion and commercial expansion CZ from that previous conditional zoning. The proposed zoning would keep those designations but change the geography of them. So I'll go into that in more detail, but essentially the majority of the site would become zoned commercial expansion, and then one of the 5 districts that is a residential mixed-use style, mostly residential district, would then be rezoned to the residential expansion conditional zone, which is kind of that shape that corresponds with that district's geography. Future land use is kind of interesting in this site. It's a few different categories. The majority of it is that traditional neighborhood designation with the proposed, with neighborhood centers designated in the center of the site, which actually corresponds generally to the mixed-use commercial area being proposed in this development. There's also parks and open space area proposed along the French Broad River. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the review process. This project and this conceptual master plan, as we're calling it, is in many ways similar to the project Aspire that we reviewed 6 or so months ago, in that the project is seeking a zoning and entitlement at a very broad scale without the types of details we typically see in conditional zoning applications. The idea being that it allows them more flexibility, and they could come back for future review in phases as necessary for the project. They'd be reviewed by staff as level 2 projects, and they would not necessarily have to come back to planning and zoning or city council as long as their future phases complied with the, substantially complied with this conditional zoning application. So this is the overall district plan. There are 5 different districts being proposed throughout the site. Overall, throughout the 5 districts, and I'll describe them in a little more detail, there's a range of uses proposed. So the residential uses would range anywhere between a minimum of 550 residential units to 935 residential units. And then the commercial uses would range in totals from basically 0 commercial uses to a maximum of 80,000 square feet of commercial use. So essentially, District 1 is just the kind of the conservation area, which actually encompasses the majority of the site to be used for, preservation of the wooded land there and the greenways and other trail networks that are proposed. Districts 2 and 3 on the left and right here are multifamily development districts. They're kind of, I guess, maybe think of like somewhat typical 4- and 5-story multifamily buildings that we review a lot of those. That would kind of be the character of them, but they'd be mainly higher density residential. District 5 in the center is a mixed-use core district that would have some residential, but would mainly be commercial and service and maybe healthcare kind of uses that would be there, and it would kind of support and be kind of the main street of the overall community. District 4 is a mixed residential district, so it's not so much mixed use, but it's different styles and types of residential. So it could range from single family, as shown and demonstrated with platted lots in parts, to duplexes, triplexes, maybe quads, which are technically multifamily, which matters for the zoning code that we'll talk about in a second. That's kind of TBD, but that is kind of the idea, is this kind of lower intensity, lower density, a little bit of single family and a little bit of missing middle in between style between the single family and multifamily type residential products. So here's the breakdown of those ranges of units and commercial space per district. So you can see the ranges there, and they'll provide some flexibility. There is I'll call it a accommodation in the project conditions that the individual district amounts can fluctuate, I think by as much as 50%, but that the overall ranges for the entire project will still remain as stated. Another important consideration of the site is the greenway network and trail network that's being proposed. And at a regional scale, the proposed greenway through the site, which is a paved asphalt-style greenway, would be a connection of the Bent Creek Greenway, which is a county plan greenway that goes south to Henderson County's, south to Henderson County and north to West Asheville. So this site's always kind of been the route that greenway would take, and it's being shown here, of course, through the site. So it would kind of connect regionally through the site and also be part of the site's transportation amenity. So some of the maybe consternation or confusion and complexity and all those words about the zoning can be explained with some of this information on this slide. So we have a few expansion districts that we can rezone conditional zonings to, the 2 main ones being residential and commercial expansion. And with this project, it has a real range of uses that we don't usually see. So all the way from single family to multifamily to commercial. And ran into an issue where realizing that the commercial expansion district, which is what the majority of the site is going to be designated, does not permit single-family detached housing. So that was kind of a non-starter for that District 4, which is why residential expansion is the zoning proposed for that mixed residential district. I know there's been some question about why not just zone the whole site residential expansion. Residential expansion allows for some commercial uses, but it does not allow for uses like food and beverage, so restaurants, any kind of lodging, including B&Bs or boarding houses. It doesn't allow for office, and it doesn't allow for most retail and services uses. So, for instance, like a grocery store wouldn't be allowed in residential expansion. So that kind of dual split zone nature of the site actually plays to the advantage of future phases of the project, where they could come back and propose things like grocery stores in the mixed-use district in District 5, but still be able to do a single-family development in District 4. But they couldn't do both in the same zoning, unfortunately. But I think we've cracked that nut. But that's kind of how we've kind of gone about it. So there are a few conditions associated with the project, one of which is regarding affordable housing, and the applicant will speak a little more about this, but the condition will read that a minimum of 20% of the units will be designated affordable at 80% AMI for a minimum of 20 years, and all of those affordable units would accept housing choice vouchers. A traffic study would be required, and the project will implement any of those recommendations identified through that process. And then finally, I didn't speak a lot about the overall roadway network. I'm gonna go back to that slide in a second to show you, but essentially there is a roadway proposed that is really only there to meet fire access requirements, which are basically triggered if part of the site has 200 or more residential units, the roadway is required. So if that District 3 has fewer than 200 units, the applicant proposes not building that roadway, which would save on impervious area and that sort of thing. So here is District 3. Here is the main roadway connection that would kind of be closer to Ferry Road. And then this is kind of the secondary connection that crosses a ravine. And it's only going to be constructed probably if it's required for fire access code. While I'm on the slide, I'll just note that there are 2 access points to the site. The main one being off of Brevard Road that kind of snakes through an adjoining property, and then the secondary one being off of Ferry Road here. There are a number of technical modifications. I'm going to try to paraphrase them for you. It's really kind of similar to the zoning designations, trying to fit this development and the different goals and styles of development being proposed into our zoning is what was challenging. And there were a number of modifications needed to make that work. A lot of these, the expansion districts require very large sites that are wide, like 1 acre minimum, 100 feet wide. Those are being requested to be reduced to allow for smaller lot subdivision, like for the single family residential. A little bit of increase in building height for District 4 to 45 feet, or 40 feet is the limit for single-family developments. A reduction in sidewalks to 8 feet along frontages and 5 feet internal, where 10 and 8 feet are typically required. Modifications to the location of parking lots in District 1 and 3, where they're typically required to be at the rear and sides of buildings. Reductions of setbacks for Districts 2, 3, and 5 to as stated here, as well as for multifamily in District 4. Modifications to entrance spacing. So there is a 30-foot wide property landscape buffer at the north side of this property where it abuts single-family zoning. There is a section of that buffer that would be encroached upon by that roadway that connects to the District 3 on the east. And this modification would allow for that encroachment, and that would reduce the buffer to 15 feet in width for 300 linear feet. The required plantings would still be provided elsewhere, but it would just reduce the width of that buffer. The allowance that green stormwater infrastructure, could be located in the buffer yards for no more than 25% of the area of those yards. A modification to allow for sidewalk on only one side of the street along the primary entry road, given the fact that it's more of a connection from Brevard Road to the project as opposed to a sidewalk that's going to serve any actual uses along that road. A modification to allow for there being no minimum parking requirements for the project. So that the idea being that the market would set the parking that's needed for the project. The maximum parking allowed would still apply though. And then in District 4, this one's a little complicated. District 4 being the mixed residential area of the project, basically saying that there may be, because of the kind of constrained nature of that district and the site in general, trying to limit the footprint of the development to stay away from the sloped areas and reduce the impact of the project on the natural environment. Some of the locations of the houses and the sidewalks and the streets, they kind of get a little bit tight. And this is trying to head off any issues if there's conflicts between the location of proposed street trees and then underground utilities like water, where you can't plant the street trees. This would allow for those trees to be located elsewhere within the boundary of that district, with the final determination to be determined in conjunction with the city's urban forester or their designee. That would not exceed 75% of those required street trees. So the project was reviewed at the February 5th Technical Review Committee, where it was approved with conditions. And the project is consistent with Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan regarding the 3 different future land use categories. So the traditional neighborhood that covers the majority of the site talks about the mix of housing all the way from single family up to multifamily working seamlessly together. The neighborhood center in the middle of the site, where District 5 is located with the mixed uses, kind of more Main Street, small scale downtown, is consistent with the description of neighborhood center being more of a small development or corner store within a neighborhood. And then finally, the parks and open space designation that includes a wide variety of different park facilities adjacent to residential areas. The project also supports a number of goals in the city's comprehensive plan, including encouraging responsible growth by prioritizing greater densities overall, increasing and diversifying the housing supply, building out the greenway network by linking greenways to transit nodes, employment, shopping, schools, parks, and other greenways, and implementing green infrastructure and enhancing the urban tree canopy. For this reason, staff recommends approval of the proposed conditional zoning amendment along with the attached Exhibit E project conditions. I'm glad to answer any questions you may have. And as I mentioned, the applicant also has a short presentation that I'd like to give to you all as well.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Okay.
Nice work.
Thank you. Would you like to hear from the applicant?
Yeah, I would.
All right, there you go.
Thank you, Will.
You're welcome.
So definitely want to echo the nice work from Will, Chris, the whole team. City staff have been really supportive in this project. As you can guess, it's a complicated project and it's going to get more complicated, but we're looking forward to it. So if you don't know me, my name's Tim Love. I work for Buncombe County Government. We're the landowner in this case. And so while the project applicant is David Tuck, he's been helping us navigate the process for the entitlement. Know that Buncombe County is the landowner and we'll be ensuring that what we talk about today is delivered. We have a whole team with us today. You can see them in the front. I'm not going to introduce them because they're going to share in the speaking today, and so they'll introduce themselves as they proceed. But know that we've got experts here in land planning, conservation, traffic planning, architecture. Our planning director is here, so a whole host of folks that are going to talk to you today. So context, I think Will did a good job of setting the stage for where the site is. We're right on the French Broad River, close to a lot of recreational amenities. But I think what's also important is to set the stage for what this site could have been. And if you're familiar with the site, you know that at one point it was slated to be a water treatment plant. If you followed local government politics a little bit, you probably knew that it was the site for the Deschutes manufacturing, so it was a brewery. After that, almost got turned into large lot, single-family housing. But then we had a moment of clarity, or at least our commissioners did, where they said, why don't we use this site as an opportunity to do really great things for our community with the land that we own. So instead of influencing developers to do good things, nothing against developers, let's just go ahead and do that with the land that we own. So that's what we did, and we began with our county commissioners and established a set of guiding public interests for the site. And those are on the screen. I'm not going to spend a lot of time walking through them today. We feel that we've met all of them that are in bold, with the exception of the second to last, which focuses on more of an economic development and job creation goal. We didn't set out to do that. We looked at the stage, looked at where we were, didn't feel that was necessary given all that was going on across the river. Where we do feel like we're nailing it is that second bullet, and that's being a model for sustainability and stewardship by conserving at least 55% of the site's natural resources, but also that top bullet where we're talking about a diverse, mixed-income community with affordability. And so when you bring all of these goals together, you know, what we get is a community that we describe as housing forward first, with conservation at the heart, but with also consideration for public recreation. Those guiding principles, when you translate them into a site plan, this is what you get. I'm going to spend time walking through these key features because I think it's extremely important for what Buncombe County Commission is planning for the site. So right off the top, you see affordability. We've got a range of units here. Will has described why that range exists, the flexibility needed in the master plan. We state that at least 20% of those units will be affordable for 20 years. Our goals are much higher than that. If you've heard us talk about this project before, we're seeking 55% affordability. We can't commit to that in the condition today because at the stage of the process that we're in, but those are our goals. If you've heard me talk about this before, you know that I'd say the only reason Buncombe County Commissioners are pursuing this project is to drive affordability and increase housing in our community. There's no other reason for them to do this. If we were interested in just creating market rate housing, they could sell the property and move on. But the interest is in achieving these goals. Additionally, District 1, Will laid it out. That's our conservation district. That's about 70+ acres conserved on the site. That gives us about 60% of the property. In doing so, we've managed to avoid crossing a lot of our tributaries that feed the French Broad River. We're protecting the wetland. We're protecting the frontage of the river, overall furthering our environmental goals. In terms of parks, in addition to the conservation space, we've got a community green at the heart of the community, as well as multiple pocket parks. From a recreation standpoint, Will highlighted it. That's about 4 miles of greenway and natural surface paved trails that you'll hear more about today. As we think about a community as a whole, we thought about what are the services you need in the community. And so there's 20,000 square feet that we planned at the front that would be dedicated to what we call community services. And what I mean when I say that is uses like childcare, potential clinic. We don't envision, a drive-through fast food establishment up here. We don't think the market would bear it, but it also doesn't suit our interests and our need for this community. Final point, I think, is the biggest point, equitable development. This project places housing for low to moderate income individuals near amenities that you would expect in communities of higher means. And so when we approached this, we said, why shouldn't someone in low to moderate income have access to conserved property, to trees, to walkable areas, to greenways, to river frontage? And so for us, it's really about equitable development as we deliver on all of these different key features. I'm not going to bore you with the history of this slide. I think the keys to know is, this property has been with Buncombe County, and as you heard me say, could have been many things. We've gone through an extensive process in terms of community engagement. We've had over 10 sessions of community engagement with those that are directly impacted, that is the neighbors, the people that actually live there. We've met with organizations. Some of you work for those organizations to understand your organizational interests. We've met with the public at large. In addition, we've went through many public briefings and regular meetings with our Board of Commissioners to end up where we are today, which is before you talking about a rezoning. I mentioned our team at the beginning. These are the folks that are in the room with us today. So you'll hear from all of them. What I do want you to know is these folks got us here, and some of them won't be taking us into the next steps of the project. As we move into the next steps of the project, we're looking for a master developer to really take this plan off the paper and go vertical. However, some of those folks are going to be with us, and so I do want to call out UNC School of Government, who's here with us today, Sarah Odio. She specifically provided a ton of support for us as we think about a development process and financing this project in a way that's realistic. It's great to draw buildings on a map. It's great to talk about levels of affordability, but it only matters if the pro forma actually works and you can actually deliver. And so Sarah and her team have brought that expertise and will lead us to sort of the next stages of the project, which are the master development process. And so as we think about, how do we know that this is going to happen? How do we ensure affordability? How do all the things on the map, all the key features, how do we make sure those happen? There's different ways, there's different tools. One tool is the tool that y'all are very familiar with, which is the rezoning, the conditions. And that gets us part of the way. The next step, though, is how do we ensure that the developer delivers on what we need? And so the way that we do that is through a development agreement between Buncombe County and the developer that is selected. In that development agreement, we'll specify additional restrictions that are going to go beyond what we see today in terms of conditions, and those will be contractual. And so that's ultimately how we'll deliver on the vision that we set for you. So I was given 3 minutes. I'm known to go long, but what we want to do is continue the discussion. There's a few other folks. I hope you'll sit with us for just a little bit. And I'd like David Tuck to join us so he can talk a little bit about the conservation and the approach that was taken there.
Hello, I'm David Tuck with Equinox. I'm a landscape architect. I just want to really quickly talk about our process of how we kind of came up with our development plan. For any of you that are planners, and this is a time to geek out a little bit because we use the layer cake method that Ian McHarg, a famous landscape architect, first pioneered almost 50 years ago. And that idea is taking ecological information and layering that so you can get a good planning and design solution. And so what we did and what this is trying to show, there's different ecological layers that came, that we evaluated, and that developed what we call the conservation areas. So on this map, you're seeing the green areas are those conservation areas. I'll touch a little bit on that in a moment. The tan areas are the buildable areas. So the buildable areas are going to be your flatter areas or your natural plant communities that don't have high ecological value. So this composite map was the framework for everything that came after, all the planning efforts. And so what we did is we developed different scenarios and concepts. We brought this in front of the Buncombe County Commissioners. We vetted it against some of the goals that were established for the project that you saw Tim present just a second ago. And they gave us feedback and direction on developing the preliminary conceptual master plan. So when we talk about conservation, we've mentioned it a couple times. What have we included? So we talk about stream buffers. We talk about wetlands. We talk about steep slopes. One of the interesting things is the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program has a biodiversity and wildlife habitat analysis, and we actually use that information based on the rankings, and we identified that as well. So all this information, plus being out on site with our plant ecologists and our design team, helped us identify everything. So the natural communities, those are the list on the right. Those are all the natural plant communities that we're protecting on this property and that are part of that conservation area. So this conservation area helps us meet multiple goals. Think about stormwater management. And when you have buffers that are this large, we're going to be able to make sure that we don't have water quality issues. And with all the drainages that are going into the French Broad River, if you saw the slide that Tim talked about, 5,000 linear feet of tributaries and tributaries flowing into the French Broad River and the French Broad River itself will be conserved as part of this process. So those are just some of the things from a conservation perspective, because people talk about conservation, so we wanted to show you exactly what we're talking about. What I really want to bring to your attention on this slide, you might not be able to see it, But there's a red line that demarcates really separates the green area from the white, which is where the development pattern is. And again, that was based on the suitability analysis, looking at the conservation and the developable areas. And that's the framework for the development for this. And the District 1, that's all in green, is defined based on this. Will did a great job already talking about the greenway, but what this image shows, there were 2 greenway studies that have previously been done. There's the county-wide greenway system, so that's in yellow, and then the Bent Creek Greenway feasibility studies that were done previous to that are in green. And so the orange is the property, and what Will showed already, the orange lines, those are the proposed greenways. So we're really integrating what was proposed previously with these past studies. All right, that's all I have for you. I'm going to turn it over to Bob Beagle.
Okay, I'm going to go super quick because I know we're going really long. My name's Bob Beagle. I'm an architect and urban designer. My role on this project is sort of doing the master plan, and the main thing I want you to sort of understand is this is very different than a normal master planning process. This wasn't a developer coming to us and saying, we got to get this many units and this many square feet, so push things around and figure out where it goes. This was kind of the opposite. So you heard David talk about what was the land telling us, so working backwards from that. You heard Tim talk about what are the county's goals in terms of affordability, so working backwards on that, and what you'll hear Sarah talk about, which market realities, development realities, some of those things, and working it kind of inverted. So in a way, I don't want you to look at this and say, this is what we're going to build. This was really about us figuring out what it could be, not what it will be. So that's using this exercise to really get us to what some of those unit counts are or could be in a way that made sense. Will did a great job talking about the district, so I won't go back into that unless we need to answer questions. And then just wanted to show you a couple pictures and renderings to give you a sense of what we think some of these features could look like. So a lot of that District 1, that conservation area, we think there's a lot of potential things that can go there, from active use to passive use to very natural use to gathering spots. And I think it's important that a lot of that's going to be publicly accessible. This isn't a private access to the river per se. The 2 larger districts, 2 and 3, are probably most likely to be rental, or at least the best opportunity for rental. Multifamily, that could be 2, 3, 4 stories, maybe even 5, depending on how it plays out. So these are just some of the ways it could look. We did this rendering. You're so high up in the air, but if you imagine that the trees in the background, about 100 feet down from that is the French Broad River. So that's kind of looking in that south direction in that District 4. That's that sort of missing middle amalgamation of various housing types, from single-family detached to attached products to even possibly some cottage court type things. And then finally, District 5 is sort of the heart of that community. So this rendering is looking to where those 3 districts meet together. The idea of a daycare or a clinic, that's on the right side, the multifamily on the left side, and the town green, for lack of a better term, in the middle. We struggled with this because we always like to have these kind of places be restaurants and walkable and those kinds of places, but given the market and the isolation of the site, that's going to be harder. So we did think it was important to have a place that you could program. Could be for weekend farmers markets or festivals. You could bring in food trucks. So you could get that sort of town center feel, at least in a pop-up way. And finally, one more to go, and then we're almost there. Sarah.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Odio. I'm an associate director with the Development Finance Initiative at the UNC Chapel Hill School of Government. And on everything we've heard so far, I come in to be bad news bear, is the best way to put it, which is I'm trying to take all of these wonderful ideas and make sure that we can actually see them developed by a private partner. But off the bat, the reality with any of these projects is that this is public interest driven, it's county driven, and so their goals are related to who are they serving, right? Who gets to live in a community like this? And so just kind of framing where we're at, when we talk about affordability, we are talking about low and moderate income households. These are single households that are earning less than 80% of the area median income. Where I come in is thinking about how the county can assist in getting these units built, and that is where their subsidy must be limited to, which is those low and moderate income households. But we were also thinking about these middle incomes, so 100% AMI, that is not typically served by affordable housing because our public partners can't actually provide subsidy for those units. So that's where there was creative design work that came into it. How can we really introduce some missing middle income serving types in this development? So the plan and the county's goal here is there will be, the multifamily is really focusing on that rental, and the mix here, we are looking at the use of the low-income housing tax credit in order to provide this affordability. And so there will be units between 30% of the area median income and 80% of the area median income within the low-income housing tax credit multifamily development. And then there will also be a market rate unrestricted component. Now, we hope to serve as many income brackets within the affordable housing as possible. We look at that 30% AMI, that hopefully will be using project-based vouchers through the Housing Authority. The goal will be to reserve that, but that is entirely dependent on the availability of these vouchers for this development. And then for the home ownership component, we want to provide through this development options for everyone at whatever stage in their life they're at, rental and home ownership to meet the county's 2030 housing goals. And so within the home ownership, about 115 home ownership units is the goal. We're leaving that space within the conditional zoning. With about 50 of those, the goal will be for restricted, really serving low-income households. We're hoping with this medium density type, right, the missing middle type, that we can better serve that middle income, maybe smaller units, these cluster homes, duplexes, with the rest at market rate. So the goal here is to try to hit as many income brackets and people at as many stages in their life as possible. I will note that as part of the low-income housing tax credit, we also hope to have a senior housing project side by side with family units as well. But the flexibility that you all give us with the conditional zoning will mean that as we get a private developer, we can adapt to potential changes in the low-income housing tax credit program over the next 3 years that might adjust how we have to think about this. But this is the goal. And so just a sense of what this means in terms of ownership costs, the 115 is not necessarily the value of that home, but thinking about that owner, what they need to afford, to unrestricted, right? So there could be some lots that could go wherever the market takes them. And then within that high density, that multifamily, we are talking about having restricted rents as low as, well, really 30% of a household's income, right? Extremely low income households. Really going as high as the market will take those multifamily in order to be able to provide that mixed income environment on this site. Now, the institutional space, you've heard of a couple of ideas. The goal really is for these to be service-oriented spaces. So thinking about what it is that these tenants, the residents in the homeownership and the rental, will need in order to have a kind of complete community on this site. And so our goal will be child care center, a health clinic. However, we are very early in this process, right? At this point, there is no developer at the table, and we would want them at the table as we really hammer out who is going to occupy that child care space, who is going to occupy that health clinic. And so in order to achieve these goals, this requires significant public investment. And so the county has already made some pretty public commitments to make sure that this can happen, right? To really get this over the finish line. So this is at least a $210 million public-private project with the county already committed to a net, right? So they're probably putting in more with selling some portions of the land. of about $34 million to see this project happen. That is about 16% public investment to achieve 54% affordability across this site. So what's next? First of all, just thank you to everybody to getting us to this point. We know that there's still a long road ahead, but it has been as smooth as I hoped it would be, so that's a good thing. So following conditional zoning approval, we would work, our organization, the Development Finance Initiative, would work with the county to release what we call a Master Development Partner Solicitation. So really going out there and helping the county find and vet the right partner to see this project forward. That means one big partner with probably smaller development partners for certain projects on the site. The homeownership developer is not necessarily the low-income housing tax credit developer or the market rate developer, but there will be an umbrella or a master development partner taking this forward for the county. And all of that, so once they select a partner, we're hoping this will be a spring, early summer process, then the county would go into the process of executing a development agreement, which is really where they're gonna cement all those critical details that bring everything we've talked about today, layered with the zoning, to what the county has envisioned. Let's bring it to life, create some houses, right? And so our hope would be that construction really starts seeing land move in 2026, 2027. This will be phased. Everything won't happen at once, but our goal will be that the low-income housing tax credit at a minimum goes first. Any questions? Is that 3 minutes?
No, you guys are well over 10 minutes. You think? Yeah, and I love Nate, but what you got? Okay,
That's it.
all right. Anybody have any questions or comments? I got one. Why are you amending the permit? Didn't you get an ordinance 2019?
Yeah, it's for residential subdivision style development. I don't have the details in front of me. I think there was.
Why are we here? Residential.
It was going to be an all single-family development, and so this is a very different plan.
That was a
Okay.
conditional zoning, and they're changing it so substantially that it requires another review by you all, and then city council will pass a new ordinance to change even though it's the same districts generally, it's such a substantial change, it has to have a new conditional zoning attached to it.
Okay. Well, it looks great. You guys presented really well. Anybody have questions?
I've got just a couple real technical ones. Have you all done a market study as part of the lead up on this? And what are the cap rates that you're showing, if we can get really nerdy?
Yeah.
Capture rates on the affordable units?
On
or
the
even
affordable units?
Or market rate?
I don't
just
have that off the
generally.
top of my head. I'll say with the market rate, there've been a lot of multifamily deliveries in recent years, but we're seeing a real slowing down now, and the vacancies are slowly actually coming back down to below 7%, so we're about 8%, but the pipeline is slowing down, so we feel there is strength in the market rate component. With the LIHTC, I don't know off the top of my head, but we felt we don't proceed to this stage unless we have confidence that there is a market for this product. We understand that the homeownership portion of it, it takes a lot more time because you are matching a home with a homeowner. And so we think of that a little bit differently.
Great, thanks. It's a leading question, obviously. I think that
There's demand, yes.
yeah, I think that's the point, is we know there's tremendous pent-up demand. Relative to the conditional zoning, I think my real question is at this early conceptual master plan phase, why put a cap or why put 935?
Yeah, 945, I think.
If a developer came in and illustrated sufficient demand, why are we imposing that limit this early?
Yes. Oh, go ahead.
I think we can all answer that in different ways, which is what's funny.
Well, I think we had to bring you something. One of the key components of the plan that was actually an environmental component, and I suppose I should say Nathan Pennington, Planning Director for the county, is we wanted to set a baseline from an environmental perspective. We wanted to look at not developing anything that was greater than 25% slope. By imposing higher standards on ourselves, we looked at basically the areas that were most suitable for development. However, we didn't want to just build vanilla boxes. We wanted to build something that was more of an inclusive neighborhood and actually build a community. And to do that, we had set basically a limit. Now, we fully understand, and how many times has someone stood before you to bring a conditional zoning and only have the conditional zoning go back based on changes to the site plan? Many, many, many times. So what we try to do is build in as much flexibility as possible, but we had to present something. So that's kind of the rationale of doing that layer cake model that David showed, is why we got to that number essentially.
That's great. And to the point of flexibility, which I think is a really admirable thing to bake into the conditional zoning, really applaud the 0 minimum parking across this site. I think that is, that's a great move and allows the flexibility to track with the phases of development when they come to the market and what the true demand would be for parking.
Interestingly enough, speaking about UDO upgrades, best management practice, that is the practice, is to move away from some of the mistakes that we all made after World War II. And that was, we don't need the seas of asphalt anymore. You simply don't, so.
Yeah, thank you.
Love that. You can say that as many times as you'd like in here. But just, I guess maybe speaking more bluntly to Commissioner Barton's, question, just being super specific, are you guys, is the development team open to a higher unit count for this entitlement?
So I'll just say, we actually explored that, and when we look at the height of the buildings and we look at the surrounding areas, so there's an apartment complex not too far down the road, trying to keep it in character with that and not going 6, 7, 8 stories, that didn't seem to be in context with what this site should be. So we pushed that envelope on where we thought that density could go. And if we hit that 900 number, I don't even think that's possible with the restrictions that we put with District 1 with the conservation area that Nate just mentioned. So I think we have given ourselves enough room, but unless we start increasing the building heights and potentially changing the character of the area, that's something that we were dealing with as a design team. And Bob, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think that's right. I think that when we kind of test fitted it, we actually came out, first of all, we don't think this is like a parking deck kind of place in terms of costs and affordability, so it's probably surface parked. And we took a very low parking ratio and looked at unit sizes and crunched it all out, and we came out on the lower end of that range a little bit. So the range is much smaller if you look at it district by district. We generally think the realistic piece there is at the lower end of the range. So we've already built in that upper end to your point of saying, if somebody can find a way to do it a little denser, that would be great. I think that gives more opportunity for affordability and density and all those things.
Yeah, it kind of speaks to, I think the general height maximum in there was around 45 feet. And that wasn't, I think, just hearing that somebody threw out potentially 5 stories, which I think is allowed by the building code for wood frame construction, that 45, 60 feet, that's.
Yeah, I think it is, in the other districts, it's 60, I think
Okay.
is what we had. At 45 was just for the lower density stuff, which we think it's going to be hard pressed to get above 3 stories, so 45 feet should be fine there. I think 60 feet would accommodate up to 5 stories in the apartment areas.
Okay.
I do want to raise one issue, which I see Vicky here from Just Economics, and we received a public comment around transit access. I think it's a really valuable consideration and point on this project. Given the large number of housing units, it'll likely create a demand for transit, and it would be my hope to see coordination to see some expansion of transit service in this vicinity. So I just, appreciate the public comment, and I appreciate you sticking around to for a long meeting on this. Transit access for this site could be transformational, and it could unlock the ability to drive your modest surface parking even lower.
Just following up on that, I did notice that one of your guiding principles was equitable transportation access, and I think that's maybe not spoken about enough as it relates to affordability, the expense of owning and maintaining a vehicle, especially one like Will pointed out, basically over in the armpit of Asheville. This is not a simple commute for many employment centers in Asheville, and then not being linked to transit is also a difficulty. So I don't know if access to transit affects project finance, or, I'd just like to hear more on that.
Sure, I'd be happy to speak to that. A couple of different things going on here. The county does operate the Mountain Mobility as a public transit system. A lot of people don't know that it actually is a public transit system. So we have that we are in control of. Second to that, we absolutely coordinate with the city and their art program in tandem with Mountain Mobility. Actually housed within my planning department is a transportation component. So as part of that, what we do is we look at transit master plans. Asheville has a transit master plan. The county has somewhat of a transit plan as well. There are competing goals in terms of extending transit lines, and we are certainly open to those conversations. However, what we have to be cognizant of is making sure you get the most bang for your buck. Economies of scale. There are a couple of other competing transit line extensions that are on the table as well. And I knew this would probably come up, so we absolutely will be looking at this area too, but we also have to keep in mind there are a couple of other routes that, one of them is Hendersonville Road, that has a lot of density down that corridor as well that we have to look at as well in tandem to this.
So just to be clear, the Mountain Mobility then would access this site?
Yeah, Mountain Mobility operates a little differently from, say, the ART system. Where the ART system are fixed routes, we operate deviated routes. We have sort of an on-demand system, and we operate 2 trailblazer routes. We also take people to the edges of the county that puts them in links with other county transportation systems like Apple Cart in Henderson County. So it operates a little bit different, but it operates in coordination with the ART system as well.
I guess, and maybe I'm just a bozo and missed it, but will that service this site?
We can get Mountain Mobility to serve this site. It just operates differently, whereas there's the service model is slightly different than what you have in the ART system.
Okay, so I think this is about 1.5 miles away from the nearest bus stop.
Sure.
And that falls, I don't know enough about it, but my understanding is Mountain Mobility operates within a certain distance of ART to provide equitable transit access. Is that
That is
correct?
one way to think about it. It operates in tandem with that system as well. It does go into the farther reaches of the county as well. So it has the ability to operate differently and go farther into the further regions of the county.
Is that like clearly defined in any way, or?
Yes, we have all the different ways in which Mountain Mobility operates available on our website. I'm happy to, it's not just a situation I can stand here and give you every single way that it operates, because some of those are on demand. So someone's able to call, hey, I need to get to dialysis, I need to get to the grocery store, or you're on a Trailblazer route. What you might be thinking of in terms of the way that the Asheville Rides Transit operates, those are all fixed routes. They have routes that have this many stops. We have those as well. We don't have as many.
Okay, I just thought there might be like a radius from stops or routes or something like that, but it sounds like it's much more dynamic.
It is a little more dynamic, that I can get more granular. In order to do that, I am probably not the best person to do that. That would probably be my transportation planner, William High, who's not with us tonight.
Yeah, I'm sorry to nerd out, but
That's quite all right.
I'm gonna go report to whoever
Quite all
I
right.
can about it and try and be informed.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have one other just technical question. Might be for staff, might be for the applicant. The housing choice voucher commitment, it's super admirable. I think, groups like Thrive and Just Economics have done tremendous advocacy work around voucher acceptance in our community. And so we've seen a greater understanding of the need to incorporate voucher acceptance in housing. However, this seems to be kind of a legacy of our Luigi policy where we are putting the vouchers just on the 80% affordable units. But the housing choice voucher payment standard currently will pay for 120% AMI unit. And so I think that true, a better commitment would be that the rental housing units would not engage in source of income discrimination, which would just open up a wider swath of the rental units for voucher holders. I'll just read the current payment standards. They change year to year. They're based on HUD fair market standards. So in December 1st, 2023, the current payment standards in Asheville for an efficiency unit is $1,713, one bedroom $1,795, two bedroom $2,016, and a three bedroom $2,592. That covers far more than an 80% AMI unit. So I'd like for the city to explore ways to get a more expansive commitment to accepting housing choice vouchers than really just purely relegating them to the 80% units. I guess the question is, was there a conversation around this, or was this kind of just adoption of how we have applied affordability on recent projects?
Yeah, we didn't talk so much about the ranges that the vouchers would apply to. We did talk about the language between accepting and reserving, which I know we've talked about a lot. So I know that's something you all are interested in knowing about. But we did not talk about vouchers for other ranges besides affordable.
I think that, yeah, the commitment to just accept vouchers, if the market rents are higher than the payment standard, they don't have to take the haircut. They don't have to accept the voucher. But if the rent ranges are covered by the payment standard, it seems like a no-brainer to just allow them to be accepted.
Sounds like a great condition.
Would the applicant agree to accepting vouchers for all of the housing units?
So this is a tricky one for us because this is a little bit of a different project, because we have DFI involved, because we are going to be working with a development agreement. That would be something that I would prefer that we would consider. We cannot commit to that tonight. However, I'm not saying that that's something we can't commit to. We need to study it further before we get to the council level.
Okay.
Condition to explore.
I mean, the other thing is, we're not talking about construction of units until 26, 27. Like, if this needs to be explored, it's a great time. This can be continued for a month, and they can meet those, have those conversations and have those meetings. I mean, this is not like we say yes tonight and they got a shovel in the ground tomorrow.
I'll just say that in terms of all of these additional items, this is the county's goal, right? They would like this, and so they're going to push for that in the development agreement. The zoning is the piece that we're waiting for in order to go out and find a development partner, so that there is some certainty that there is a path forward to actually allow this vision to get built. But the development agreement will, and I will say that it's going to be a big part of the conversation with any market rate developer, and even with the homeownership component, because vouchers can also be used to buy a home. It just depends on the local housing authority, and so it can be used for those mortgage payments.
Whoa,
And so
that's cool.
when
I
we
didn't know
say,
that.
so when
Yeah,
we say
super
100%
cool.
of the affordable units accepting vouchers, that's going to be, part of it is thinking about how you work with a voucher holder to sell a home and all of that. So the county will push for market rate development to accept vouchers. It's a little bit premature right now. And, we think about trying to actually get this done. And that flexibility, again, repeating what Nate said, is going to be super critical to see that market rate component move forward. So,
I had a follow-up question, because I was going to ask it about clarification. So if their condition is 20%, 80%, 20 years, I was wondering if you were interested in finding out whether that will be across housing types, which you could define it that way, or if in the minds, and I don't know if this proposal, if you've thought about it, if you're thinking of, we're going to meet that affordability requirement with the tax credit developments. And even though the overall goal is to do a wider range of affordability, the other little bit difference here, usually our conditions say that this will be subject to an affordable housing deed restriction, which I write, and which our community development department monitors. Now, this is the county, they're our partners, they work with affordable housing. So they did ask, can we, instead of using that language about the city's deed restriction, go with the development agreement, which Sasha Verchinsky was asked, and she thinks that's fine. But I do think when you're looking at this condition, I just want to be sure that you're clear on what that means, or if that matters to you, whether it's the 20% across all housing types, or if you'd like, sometimes when you do sort of multifamily versus affordable single-family housing, then all the affordable gets concentrated in the multifamily. And I don't know, if it might be something you have to think about as well. But I just thought I'd ask if you want a clarification there, if that might be something else that you'd want the team to look into.
Super cool question, because I was making the assumption, based on some of the data provided, that it was across housing types. Best not to make assumptions. There's a saying about that somewhere.
Maybe that's what they meant.
that is 20% across the entire site. So if you notice the numbers, we've got 50 of the homeownership units will ideally be affordable for low-income households. And then about 270, 260 of the rental units. So it is rental homeownership at least 20%.
Okay, so we might want to modify the condition, the 20%, to say
Correct.
across housing types, if that's something that would be agreeable to the developer. Just to
How
make
are
that clear.
how are you defining type? Sorry, I just want to be clear before we say.
Rental, homeownership.
Across tenure then?
Attached house.
Whether they're multifamily or single-family housing. So unit type, unit, I guess I'll leave it to the commissioners to see what you're most interested in. But
Yeah, I think this part's really important. It's a big part of the community conversation we continue to have, which is like not just affordability, but actually the ability to build equity and intergenerational wealth. Hearing that vouchers can be used to actually buy a property, super important for me to know. I feel like a bozo for not knowing it, so thank you for educating us on that. Also, Janice, really appreciate you being super detail-oriented and making sure we include the language in the right way. I also feel that it's maybe even more of a powerful time to step back and be thoughtful about the way these conditions are being put forth to council, and put it forward in a meaningful way to what we've heard from the city.
If I could add to a suggestion with what we're working with the way the conditions are constructed now, the housing types are spread out amongst identified districts. So it could possibly be that those are amongst all districts now. that wouldn't work for them, I'm seeing, so. And that may not be, I didn't catch what y'all were saying for sure, but that may not be something the county's able to commit to tonight as well, so.
Or if you can think of proposed language that might get at that, and maybe you did start to say what it would be, but I wasn't clear on how we'd modify this basic condition.
Yes.
You know, sometimes people build multifamily, they build 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. We aren't very good always at saying, and we don't want all the affordable units in the 1 bedrooms. We want the percentages of this type. And sometimes we have gotten that detail, but this is one of those cases where you want over a percentage, maybe equal to, if you only have X single-family homes, of the percentage, you do maybe 1 affordable single-family home, that kind of.
I hesitate to say type only because if you looked at it, there's, cluster home, duplex, townhome, single family, and, what the type mix might change. And so I would say tenure, so 20% by tenure, and that means home ownership and rental. So 20% of the rental units and 20% of the home ownership units. Now, I do want to remind you that that is minimum that the county is going to do. Their goal really is 55% of these units, and they are thinking about distributing across the site as being a critical part of the development agreement. It is too soon now, in part because of how these projects actually get financed. With the market rate unrestricted units, if we do 30% to 80% AMI in a multifamily low-income housing tax credit development, we are not allowed to have unrestricted units within that development. So there are limitations around how these funding sources are used, and that's why I hesitate to agree to, across the districts, but across tenure, I think is solid commitment. Yeah.
So maybe a minimum of 20% of the rental and owned residential units?
Yeah, it will be.
I don't know this tenure stuff.
My suggestion, that's saying the same thing, but to keep it as simplistic as possible, we are so far exceeding minimum goals that we would appreciate having the flexibility to the maximum extent possible as we make our way to council. And that's why there's just so many unknowns with not having a developer on board yet. And you get a further insurance policy with the development agreement. You also get the full backing of the county having its own community development division, of which we do our own deed restrictions and monitor. We do the exact same thing as the city and our own division as well. And we continue to ramp up production of our own. We, of course, work with folks in MHO and Habitat and groups like that all the time. So just rest assured there are additional insurance policies here as it relates to the provision of affordable housing.
Okay.
I'm going to chime in here a little bit because something I did want to mention because I feel like we glossed over it. And so Sarah, Commissioner Wheatley, I saw you, when you saw the numbers, you said, wow, those are big numbers. And so I think it's really important to talk about this potential net county investment. So that's $34 million, could be $40 million, depends on where the market takes us. I know y'all know that, but let's break this number down. $40 million, what is that? What does that go to? So part of it is our commitment to transportation improvements, building a new access road off of Brevard Road so people can actually get into the site, address traffic patterns. It's a commitment to improving existing DOT roads that, are incompatible for the current development. And so that's a portion of it, but 2/3 of that number goes straight to housing subsidies. And so when our commission looked at these numbers, we didn't say it to you tonight, but that when they look at that 34 million, what they see is those housing subsidies just to draw down rents. And so I think it's a really important distinction because creating affordability isn't necessarily rocket science, right? Part of it is like you subsidize what the market won't deliver. And so when we talk about commission and what they're doing, we can talk about conditions and the rezoning and how we can try to encourage it by that. But the real test is when a local government body agrees to put dollars down on the table to subsidize those rents to drive a need in our community. And so I wanted to mention that because to me, that's where the rubber really meets the road, and that's where I think our commission has really stepped forward and is leading on this. And I don't feel like we talked about that as we started talking about some of these more nuanced items around, voucher acceptance or transit or whatever it is. So just wanted to put that out there. Welcome to take other questions.
I really appreciate that statement, Mr. Love, and I, just to confirm, this site being in the city, would it be eligible for Housing Trust Fund? Could the city also add some subsidy to buy some affordable units?
So we don't administer that fund, so I can't commit to an answer.
But it's
right now,
eligible
But this
being
is
in
something
the
we can
city.
explore and talk to
Yeah.
colleagues on.
We have a number of tax credit developments that are funded through the Housing Trust Fund, in addition to the county funding them, so if it's going through that, it would probably seek those funds.
I think that's the advantage of, when you can bring in multiple municipal partners, kind of spread the subsidy around. If this had been just in the county, it would not have access to those resources, so.
And that's a good point too, Commissioner Barton, because we are part of the consortium. And so those conversations take place naturally and organically anyway, because we're one of the member agencies, but that is just county commitment alone.
Okay. Any more comments, questions? We can open for public comment. All right, public comment at 7:32. Get up there.
I'm Vicki Meath. I'm with Just Economics. And I want to first say that, first of all, we support this, process going through. We think what the county is doing in terms of affordable housing is great. It's desperately needed. However, I do want to add a couple of pieces from my public comment that I made over email around transit. Mountain mobility is not the same thing as a bus system. There's a lot of restrictions on mountain mobility. The county does run Trailblazer routes, but there is not currently, nor to my understanding, any planned Trailblazer route in that area. And so it's not the same. And so we are also a part of a transit coalition, a larger transit coalition, and have been working on transit for a long time. We've been asking the county in a different department to partner with the city to collaborate on transit. Collaboration does not just mean asking the city to extend their route. It means partnering on both planning and funding, because the city system is a complex scenario. So if you extend this route 1.5 miles, you're changing all of the times in the system. So the cost of that 1.5 miles might look like this, but really the planning and the whole changes to the system are a lot larger. So again, we support this. We support what the county is doing on affordable housing, and I really appreciate y'all and considering transit as a part of the larger affordability picture, as especially when we're talking about voucher acceptance. If we want people to be able to access this, we're leaving out a whole bunch of transit-dependent riders from accessing this. So I'm not sure how this plays into the conditional zoning, and maybe it doesn't right now, but I just wanted to get it on public record that, we really want the county to be working with the city, and there's time. This development's not ready. There's not a shovel in the ground tomorrow, to work with the city in both planning and funding to extend transit and really understand that Mountain Mobility is not a replacement for the fixed route bus system that the city of Asheville owns and operates. Thank you.
Thanks.
Come on up.
I think this is a great project. I mean,
What's your name?
David Moritz. It's a project that we need. We need more housing in the city. I have great respect for David Tuck. He designed a project that I'm building in West Asheville called Craggy Park. I do have a couple of comments, though, on the variances that they're asking for. I also believe parking is not a human right. We shouldn't focus so much on parking. It's destroying so much development that we could do. But in relation to what you guys discussed before, that's an incredibly huge concession you're making to this developer that no other private developer has gotten. So it shows extreme favoritism to the county to tell them in a location that requires parking that they'll have complete, absolute, no need for parking. As a private developer, I can tell you right now, if that was the condition, I would be doing developments all over. For example, on Haywood Road, the parking requirement there stops all housing development. That's why we have no housing development on Haywood Road. And that could be said for many areas. So if you're going to give that concession, which is fine, I think it should be very well noted that that's an extremely large concession you're making, and that's a precedent that when I come for my development, I'm going to ask as well. The second concession are the sidewalks. Sidewalks are the bane of my existence. I love sidewalks, but the city makes me pay for all of them. And they have to be 10 feet wide. But these guys are in the 5 feet or whatnot. I don't understand. They haven't explained why that concession is required. If we have rules, they should apply to everybody. I love this project. I think it should be done. We should have housing. It's well-designed and everything. But the concessions should be looked at very carefully. And any concession you give to the county, when a private developer comes here, should also be given the same respect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want me to say something about conditional zonings? If a private developer applied for a conditional zoning and asked for a modification, that would be considered as part of the conditional zoning. It's not just something that's being considered because it's the county. Any conditional zoning process would allow to request that kind of modification.
I think the question was the applicant was wondering if they could respond to that. And I just didn't know how.
That's up to
Yeah, I mean, sure. Let's hear it.
A couple of things I would say. One is these are not variance requests. This is not a quasi-judicial format. It's a legislative hearing. These are modifications as allowed by the code. That's all we're doing is exercising that ability. Again, one thing that I think is important to note is that the city has different sidewalk standards for different areas. Obviously, if you're downtown, you have wider sidewalks, so there's much different requirements here. I would like to point out that we do have a couple of different sidewalk widths throughout this project. You have areas where you do have wider sidewalks, and you have areas that are more of a suburban standard where you have a more narrow sidewalk. So that's my really just simple answer to those. Again, back to the parking again. I think that modern practices and best management practices are to move away from parking and overparked properties. I think that overparking properties leads to any number of environmental issues with runoff, urban heat island effects, and the city has made it very clear that we want to have more trees. To have more trees, you have less pavement and less impervious areas.
And several applications have come before the commission, and we've asked them to get rid of parking minimums, and the developer has not agreed to that condition. Lots of private developers, so if they wanted to do it, they could, they just won't. Any other comments?
I do. I back the public comment that it is a big concession based on the current UDO. I do think we should modify that UDO. So I think there are many truths here. I think parking takes up way too much space, is a huge burden, is often over-provided, and also the UDO could do a better job, especially of addressing existing transit corridors where transit does serve the public already. So thank you for both awesome public comments.
So has the city committed to extending that transit line to this property?
No.
Yeah,
No.
I don't believe so, but we're happy to check in with our
What's this
transportation
talk that's
department
going to
and
happen
see
in
where
2
it is.
years?
Yep.
Okay.
I'll make just a quick comment responding to the sidewalk width reduction. We grant that it feels like in just about every conditional zoning that comes before us, which begs the question of, is the standard applicable? And I think, earlier in this meeting, we were attempting to formalize a process to put forth UDO amendments for consideration. This is a minor one that we resolve through a technical modification in a conditional zoning process. But for a project that doesn't need to go through a conditional zoning process, we do have lots of barriers and hurdles to address. So I appreciate the public comment. I think it's well noted that we are making concessions on sidewalk width and parking that likely should be UDO amendments.
Do we want to?
Gavel drop.
Yeah, is there any interest in conditional zoning for addressing this investigation of the transportation? Whether that be an extension, partnering, a
Good faith
blazer.
effort.
Yeah, good faith effort. We've done some of these winks to council before.
Yeah.
Are they always effective? Tough to tell, but it is a way
Applicants shall
to encourage that conversation.
work with.
It's a good point. I know we do it with projects when it's like adjacent to the site or a smaller scale. It is something they could consider.
Or NCDOT.
So-
It's a big ask.
Here's where I get to it, right? I don't know that any of us know in this room, and I meant to hold myself accountable to this, how many apartment complexes are being built along Brevard Road. We don't know what the demand for transit is along Brevard Road. I know there are many apartment complexes being built in the county that aren't in the city that could be served by a transit route being, like the assumption we're having in this conversation is that 1.5 miles only meets the needs or tries to provide service to these folks. But being a person who goes down this way for building supply materials every day, I know there are many apartment complexes already out there, and that would open up that housing, not just this housing, but other housing to people who rely on transit. And I think that's an interesting conversation is, are there positive externalities associated with affordability that might be addressed in existing developments by extending that transit line? I don't know, I'm not that smart.
Is that a fair condition to hang on this
Well,
project?
we have, we've done conditions, work in good faith efforts with the DOT to investigate
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
or that. So
Yeah.
I don't know where it gets you, but I have noticed there's nothing in the conditions that, I don't see anything in the conditions that talks about transit. So if the applicants are willing to consider a condition like working good faith with the city to see about opportunities to extend bus transit, I'm not sure where they feel about that.
So we would have no problem with language that said something like, further explore and study this in tandem with already approved and adopted transit master plans. Obviously, we know the
Super
county.
cool.
Yeah, we know the county continues to urbanize. This is something that comes up repeatedly. What you want to avoid in mass transit are just one-offs. You want to try to pick up as many stops as possible and as many people along the way. So it's something that, to the effect of study or explore, extension of transit route would be fine.
I feel like there's an assumption that people would work in Asheville, but maybe they work in Hendersonville or whatever, so it's interesting conversation for sure.
Just an idea, once transit is extended down this way, transit night at the Winter Lights, you
Oh,
get on a bus
yeah.
and you just
I'm
go to
in.
the Arboretum.
Yeah, don't have to pay for parking.
That's it. No, I really do appreciate it because, we've had city projects come before us that don't address greenways. And then there's like this conversation of like, come on, man, we're going to talk interdepartmentally. And I'm like, I don't know. I run into issues with planning and urban design and developmental services. You would think those are tied together. And sometimes it's easier to just have a little checklist to go down at a future date.
Okay, so we're adding a condition. Any other conditions?
I would like to see the voucher at least study. I mean, I know, once again, there's a lot of uncertainty with a big master plan, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I would like council to at least have that on their list to examine it during that conversation, even if it wants to get removed, whatever. That's not necessarily up to us. I felt it was a strong point, especially with the equity component.
So the
My only
applicant, yeah.
suggestion on something like that, and if it pleases the board, maybe what you want to do is not make that a specific condition, but you could send basically additional comments from the planning board, transit being one, this being another, in conjunction with sending up that staff report, if that's okay with staff as well.
Yeah, we're glad to convey that. That's a better vehicle for showing interest that the commission has to for the expanded housing choice voucher acceptance throughout the whole project. So I don't know if that gets consent.
I mean, that's up to the commission. But there have been times where you've said, well, I don't feel so strongly, I want to make it a condition, but I would, in addition to, if it's approved, recommend that it either gets considered by council or something like that.
Well, exploring the transit seems like it can be a condition, and then this other one for the voucher, it's just going to have to be an email. So, because it doesn't.
In the pre-meeting,
Yeah.
staff requested that we go speak to council. I'd be glad if we want
Yes,
to.
of course, that's
If
also
you'd like
an
us to
option.
meet or represent
Yes.
us, I'd be glad to talk with
But right now, we have an
council.
applicant that doesn't want to commit to that, so we need to move this forward with those modifications.
And I wasn't quite clear on the affordable housing, the tenure question. Is that not important to you to add as a condition or?
Well, it sounded like the modification to the existing 9A condition that the applicant was willing to do is just add a minimum of 20% of the residential units by tenure or across.
Which maybe we should define, because not everybody, I didn't even know what tenure was, but rental and ownership, was that what tenure means in your?
Yeah, that's what yeah.
That's okay?
Yeah, because I think, I mean, I'm certainly sympathetic to the understanding that there needs to be flexibility around what works for the tax credit program, and you can't say that that's good. Yeah, okay.
And I'm sorry, I had a clarification too about the greenway, because I didn't see in the conditions, and I was a little confused. I know when when this came forward before, to the extent that there was any property that the greenway path was going to utilize, the developer was going to provide an easement. But this sounded like whoever in the final plan, the greenway is actually going to be built. And as somebody who works with our greenways, I know things can be approved as a greenway, but it takes forever to fund it. It's $1 million a mile, as you know, I'm sure. So I just didn't know if it is, the condition is that the greenway will be built or completed, I don't, as part of this.
I think a couple things on that. A, the greenway will absolutely be contained within an easement. No questions asked. And
Can you repeat that?
the greenway will be contained within an easement.
So they're going to grant, is the easement running across
So
this
the county
property?
is going to be in control of that easement, and the county will place the easement on the area that will be built for the greenway. The county will probably also be involved somewhat in funding and building and construction of that greenway as well. Correct? Well, we don't know the percentages of numbers.
Respectfully, the prior project a little different because it wasn't county owned. We intend to build a greenway on our land, and that's what we'll do. And so I don't know if that answers the question, but I'm just trying to be real direct. That's the plan.
As part of this development?
Yes.
I mean,
As presented and submitted in the TRC documents.
Yeah, it's in the motion.
It's what?
It's in the motion.
It's in the motion?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, but is it in the conditions? I'm just, I guess it's on the site plan? Is it on the site plan? I'm just,
It is.
we've had other ones where the greenway's called out. That's why I'm asking.
There's a recreation plan that's been submitted, and it shows all the trails, and so that should be part of the record for this project.
the
So,
site plan.
right, so we feel like it's on the plan, we're going to be held accountable for that.
Okay. I wanted to raise it just for the commissioners because I haven't seen it.
Thank you.
Sure. Did you close public comment?
Public comment, I was just curious.
I did.
I didn't, sorry.
I did, I think so. Closed it at 7:51 again.
Thank you.
I'm going to try and make a motion. I'm a little hungry, so let's see how this goes. I move to approve the conditional zoning request for the property located at 1568 Brevard Road from commercial expansion dash conditional zone, COM EXP dash CZ, and residential expansion conditional zone, res EXP dash CZ, to commercial expansion district dash conditional zone, COM EXP dash CZ, and find that the request is reasonable and is in the public interest, is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meets the development needs of the community, and that the request, one, prioritizes greater densities of development overall as a means of achieving more walkable and efficient urban environments, and as a tool to help protect and preserve urban space and the natural environment. Two, increases the supply of affordable housing in proximity to school, transit, and parks. Three, links greenways to transit nodes, employment, shopping, schools, parks, and other greenways. And four, implements low-impact development and other types of green infrastructure strategies. And modifications to the conditions include condition, let's see. I need help. I forgot.
With a modification to condition 9A, that the 20% affordable units would apply both to the homeownership and rental units planned for the site.
Good job.
And a modification, and an additional condition that the county, the applicant would agree to explore transit extension in partnership with the city. Is that a, explore?
Explore. All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, passes. Motion passes unanimously. I know that we have one more item, but I would request a 5-minute break, please. Thank you. At 7:54, return at 7:59. Let's do it, gavel.
Thank you. Take care. Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Next up, we got a zoning text amendment, a request to consider a proposed zoning text amendment to Chapter 7 of the Unified Development Ordinance, UDO, to revise the allowed uses within a home occupation. Planner Coordinating Review, Chris Collins.
Hey, good evening. Chris Collins again, Assistant Director of Planning and Urban Design. I have 4 slides to show you on what is a simple text amendment to kind of close a loophole within our home occupation standards. We've been working with the city attorney's office, who requested that we take this amendment forward promptly to close this loophole. So right now, what we're looking at, there are no limitation on land uses eligible to be operated as a home occupation right now. This text amendment will tie the city's current home occupation requirements to the permitted use table within the UDO. And this text amendment will, and to take that further, this text amendment will remove uses listed as expressly prohibited in that use table as allowed uses within home occupations. What does that mean? Oh, I forgot I have one extra slide. I was going to jump right into it. To clarify, for home occupations, we're not talking about teleworking situations. These are permits issued for a business being operated from someone's home, regulating things like parking, signage, use of an accessory structure, percentage of the home used in commercial vehicle storage. The permitted use table has a section called its uses expressly prohibited, where uses are called out as expressly prohibited either citywide or in certain parts of the city. This right here is from the table. This tells you the types of uses that are in that list right now. So presumably, these uses, if someone wanted to conduct them from their home under a home occupation permit, our staff would be required to approve that home occupation permit if it met all of their standards. So there are some odious uses here that could have negative impacts on neighborhoods. So that's why I put that up there for you. I do realize as staff that, like many parts of the UDO right now, there are more changes that need to be made. And there's been some dialogue with Commissioner Wheatley about what those might look like. Staff is not in disagreement with those changes at all, but we do have a need to push this one through quickly to close this loophole and hopefully revisit this either as a separate zoning text amendment or part of the UDO, depending on where we think this falls in time sensitivity. All right, that's my whole presentation on this amendment.
And who created that new permitted use table?
Well, that was copied. Now, that
Just curious, just curious.
we always had a section for expressly prohibited uses.
Okay,
This
okay.
did not happen because of an omission from that use table.
Yeah,
This is something that came to our attention just now. It was a problem in the previous use table and in the previous iteration of the 716 section on home occupations, just as it is right now, so.
okay, thank you.
All right.
Any comments, questions?
I'm sorry, not to keep us here. Could you go back one slide on the expressly prohibited uses? I just have this is just a curiosity question. So zoning has become a mechanism to limit crypto mining. Does mining on the expressly prohibited uses encompass crypto mining as we define it, or not? Do we don't have a mechanism to?
It's not, it doesn't have a definition in the UDO, so it can cover crypto mining.
There you go.
Deal?
So,
And it's not specified, you find the use that it's most closely aligned to. and
Correct.
that's the-
In the year
Well, what is
2024.
It's a very energy intensive and noisy process that a lot of data farms are being located in mostly rural communities in Western North Carolina where there aren't a lot of people, but
So it's
The
not
land is
mining
cheaper.
crypts.
it's mining Bitcoin.
It's Bitcoin, that's, what you mean, Bitcoin?
it's not physically mining
digital-
anything.
digital mining.
It's,
Yeah.
it's a lot of computers thinking really hard and generating a tremendous amount of electricity so that somebody can trade currency for,
Money,
yeah.
yeah.
It was just, I saw mining on the list.
No, you're good. It's just, those conversations have been coming up in land use.
So I do have one, and it is serious. I would like to address it. Inside of 7-16-1, paragraph E. Accessory dwelling units are expanded on quite a bit, to the point where during the middle housing study, any future ADU requirements are going to be linked to this. And if, this commission and staff see fit, I think it's low-hanging fruit and will easily unify the UDO more by removing a redundant ADU section in here, because it will require future modification with other housing amendments.
One thing I'll offer in response to that is one thing you're going to see in April with the first round of missing middle housing changes, and that should be at your April meeting, as long as council guidance remains as it is, are some tweaks to the ADU section of the code. And we could come in at that time and remove that redundancy for ADUs as well.
I have short-term memory issues, to be real honest.
Yeah.
I've got some paper. If you'd like.
Tonight's the night of, not the night of support. Make a motion, I'll vote against it, and we can all move on.
Jeffrey, pull up the section. What you got?
I'm looking at the UDO.
Yeah.
I can't find it.
716, what is it, Jared?
It's inside the folder for this week, inside the text amendment.
Oh, the draft ordinance. I see accessory structure.
The one that says, if the home occupation is housed in an accessory structure, the square footage of the accessory structure shall not exceed 25% of the square footage of the principal structure home, provided, however, that artist studios and workshops that are separate structures shall adhere to the following standards, and it has them. Is that the one you're talking about?
Correct.
And there's another one, I think. Artists, studios, and workshops developed as home occupations and located in an accessory structure shall
No,
meet the
paragraph
following.
J.
Yeah. So what are you proposing?
Remove paragraph J altogether. It's got its own separate UDO section now, accessory dwelling units, that would.
So accessory structure is not the same as accessory dwelling unit, I believe.
We do have different standards for accessory structures and accessory dwelling units.
So it could be a shed.
Leave it in.
Yeah, it's different than, right? You're saying it's repetitive with the,
With other sections of the UDO. So in
That
other
relate
words,
to-
if somebody was building a accessory structure for not home occupation, it would be in a different section than a home occupancy. It's fine. Obviously, no one's looked at this before this meeting, so.
No, I get what you're saying, and I agree. I think that it's applying a stricter standard just by virtue of the home occupation and not, what we seem to be trending towards, which is regulate the structure size.
Correct. Just maintaining the UDO business as usual without reviewing it in its totality, because we're being requested to review it, seems counterproductive to this board, this commission, and even staff's objectives of just being good, diligent individuals. If we're updating UDO section, it's my position that we should look at the entirety of the UDO and not look at microscopically at one sentence that's included that we've been questioned on. To my knowledge, at the bottom of each section, we recognize when the UDO was last amended, what ordinance attached with. There are many administrative burdens associated with every text amendment, such as the fee schedule, which is like $850 at the county clerk's office. All of these things, we're jumping through all these hurdles kind of mindlessly, and then we're requesting a complete UDO rewrite 5 years later after we've gone through all these exercises. And I felt this was a great opportunity for us to all thoroughly review the UDO, make a quick modification that brings it more in line instead of potentially going through the same exercise in April. And now we have to make sure that 716-2 is included in the missing middle housing. And everyone's going to wonder why home occupation is being addressed with with middle housing. So, one small attempt gone missing.
So you were proposing strike J and E, or?
Yeah, unless there's a good reason why this isn't moderated by another part of the UDO, which I'm really confident it is, and I sent an email addressing what portions of the UDO addressed it.
Well, we didn't advertise that we were going to change that, right? Because this was specific to that one, the one place where it was amended.
So what does the advertisement say?
Yeah.
Because I'm really interested on what exactly a proper advertisement is.
What you have in your materials is what people were.
I know, but we get that like 3 days before the meeting,
You're
the
right, I'm
notice.
sorry, the advertisement would have said something general, like amendment to UDO.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether it specified to make it in line with the permitted uses, but what you're seeing now in the cross-out of the suggested modification is just that addition to add the expressly prohibited table, to link home occupations with that expressly prohibited section. So, I don't know if staff knows how the two intersect, if they in fact do conflict. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that and confirm it.
So 716, hang on, I forgot the letter reference. E does propose smaller accessory structure allowances when used as conjunction as an artist workshop or studio than we allow across the board. The question we haven't answered as staff is, what was the intent behind a smaller allowance and a larger setback for these structures when they're being used as artist, I have a hard time saying this for some reason, artist studios or workshops, as opposed to just a standard accessory structure? That's an answer we're not prepared or able to give you at this time. And that's the one question that it feels like we would need to know if there was a good reason for that. More for that smaller allowance for size and larger requirement for setback when an accessory structure is being used in that way.
I mean, it seems pretty clear that the difference between a just typical accessory structure and a home occupation would be customers, And so the setbacks are likely there to control commercial activity in a residential area. And I think maybe the question is, well, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah, and more than likely, if construction's going on in a residential area, is it likely to be, used as an artist structure for long when there are higher uses in general? It seems redundant, and overly burdensome to somebody who just wants to have an accessory structure. But, yeah.
And I pulled up the email, so you referenced section 7-14-1, accessory uses and structures. So it's the one immediately preceding this section.
I really appreciate your close review, Commissioner Wheatley, and I do think as we, lean into the imperative to look for barriers within the UDO, I do think it's incumbent on us to kind of do a comprehensive review. I think you also cited the parking space requirement as, why.
Yeah, correct.
As we move towards reducing parking requirements, potentially, missing middle housing report suggests removing the parking requirement for accessory dwelling units. So,
Yeah, I think there are many ways that this study that we did produce and have gone through a really long exercise and are going to go through a long implementation process, why it doesn't intersect with other parts of our UDO is tough to tell. Why we would take that lens off when we look at home occupation is also tough to tell. Is there an equity question in there? I think so, because 1,000 square foot home with a small percentage use of the structure is maybe one bedroom versus if you have a 4,000 square foot home up Kimberly and you can use 25%, that's essentially 1,000 square feet of potential commercial space to be used as a professional office of some sort. Yeah, I think within this section of the UDO, there are many questions that could have been addressed with more timely conveyance of information and more engaged interaction between legal and staff, I would bet, and then also staff and this board. So,
If I could just make one statement to that, I agree the changes are needed. And as someone who works to manage a department with staff members who, as we talked about earlier, don't have enough time to get done what they need to, I also deeply sympathize with the need for efficiency and effectiveness while we're working through it. Occasionally, an amendment will come across that is something that's being driven just to close a significant but small loophole. And in that case, that looks like the city attorney's office asking us, please push this through in 30 days. We will work with you. They worked with us to get this written quickly and easily. And so really, while I don't disagree with your sentiments and I want to be efficient, in this case, we really need to push this one through with a simple change.
I've got to just process, I mean, this goes to city council for full approval. Couldn't, if, these, in my mind, very good observations or recommendations that come out of this body, couldn't city council revert to staff's recommended adjustment, which is just the addition of K?
I think so. It gets a little more complicated to push forward. It's kind of like presenting alternates to city council is not how they're used to doing business. Doesn't mean they can't do business that way. It just gets a little more complicated when you present the hearing. We also could include information in the staff report that says the Planning and Zoning Commission would like to see these items addressed as well, or something to that nature.
Marking this down as a section that gets amended along with the other ones that we've talked about. This comes from a different section of the legal department, but there's something pending that we thought, oh, this is a loophole and we better close it. And that's why it's so focused on this without that more comprehensive, looking at all the parts of the section that might be ripe for an amendment. And so I know you've heard a lot tonight about moving things forward in a certain way, and we have talked about there's sometimes better ways to package things. It's not always just because we're working in this section of the UDO that's the time to change it. Sometimes it's a topical, okay, as Stephanie was saying earlier, with the missing middle, there's going to be like 48 proposed changes to the UDO sections of the UDO, and those will all be lumped under getting at these maybe things that are repetitive, conflicting in terms of housing uses and types. And I can commit to writing this down and looking. I have not looked at it with that more comprehensive lens to see if in fact where the conflict is, or but I can commit to working on that as part of these other, UDO amendments that you will be, sounds like will be proposing as you go along as a planning and zoning commission as a whole, and working with staff who also will be proposing similar UDO amendments. Hopefully the UDO amendments the staff proposes and the commission propose are going to be in sync at some point. We're just kind of in this process of believe us when we say for years we have a list. I have a list of things that, oh yeah, got to change that at some point. We've talked about it. It's not the best way to run things, to do these piecemeal. I agree. But you can't always do it comprehensively. And then this one was time sensitive, and it's focused on linking home occupations with, so they can't do that, those uses. That's all I can say about it. But I will commit to looking at it further and maybe coming up with something with the staff to say, how does this fit into, it sounds like it fits into these other missing middle text amendments that might be coming along. I mean, it's a good catch.
Yeah, I guess it's unfortunate that, it feels like a sense of urgency can be conveyed only one direction. When a sense of urgency is conveyed back another direction, it's not, and we're trying to strike that balance, and I think it's a learning relationship for everyone. And so I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm not trying to be overly weedsy. I'm just trying to be as helpful as I can be. So I appreciate the dialogue.
You're good with sending that recommendation up?
I'm not making a motion.
All right, somebody.
Can we open for public comment?
I don't think we have one. We don't have a staff report on this.
Come on.
Yeah, there's a staff report.
Can we
Under home
public
occupation?
comment and close it? Sorry.
Okay, public comment will open at 8:24 p.m. Seeing as there is no public comment, we will close at 8:24-ish p.m.
There's the magic touch there, Jeffrey.
That's why they keep me here.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion?
I move to recommend approval of the proposed wording amendments to Chapter 7 of the Asheville Code of Ordinances and find that the proposed amendments are reasonable and are in the public interest, are consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meet the development needs of the community in the amendment. And in that the amendment will, one, help promote transparency and clarity for all users of the UDO.
I was like, Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Could I make a friendly amendment?
Sure.
Question to attach a recommendation that a comprehensive view of this UDO section be made prior to presentation to council, which would include a specific analysis of section E and J, as well as reconsideration of any undue parking requirements that are imposed on home occupations.
Friendly amendment accepted.
Does the commission accept that? Little.
Yes.
Okay. Ayes all around.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. We're weary at this point. Motion to adjourn, second, anybody?
Second.
All right, aye.